SleepMatters. The suffering of the innocent. Imagine a child in a war zone. Not because of what they did, not because of who they are, but because they were simply born in the wrong place at the wrong time. Their life, already too fragile, becomes a battlefield for forces they do not understand and cannot escape. They do not carry hatred. They do not hold grudges. They just cry. And in those cries, the world hears something ancient and unresolved. The problem of innocent suffering is not just a moral question. It is a mirror that shows us the limits of every answer we think we have. Philosophers have tried for centuries to explain why pain often finds those who deserve it the least. Some turn to religion, some turn to reason, but all eventually reach a point where explanation falls apart. In classical theology, this is known as the problem of theodicy. If there is a God who is all-powerful and all-good, then why would such suffering be allowed? And if there is no God, then what kind of world have we found ourselves in, where the weak are prey and the strong are often indifferent? But let us step away from theology and look deeper into the emotional landscape. The child, the animal, the victim who did not ask for pain becomes a symbol, a quiet wound in the structure of reality. Their suffering challenges every narrative that tries to claim the world is just. It confronts every system that pretends there is fairness embedded into the design of things. The French philosopher Albert Camus once said that the only serious philosophical question is whether or not life is worth living. But before that question can be answered, there is another one hiding in its shadow. If life is worth living, even with the presence of innocent suffering, then what does that say about us? Have we become too comfortable with looking away, too skilled at building mental walls around the pain of others so we can continue walking forward? Innocent suffering also unravels moral clarity. It is easy to judge when we believe in merit, when we think people get what they earn. But when the innocent suffer, we are forced to see how little control anyone really has. A newborn in poverty, a bystander in a tragedy, a kind heart that breaks under the weight of mental illness. These are not abstract statistics. They are living contradictions in the idea that goodness protects us. In Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, a character named Ivan refuses to accept a world where innocent children are tortured, even if that suffering were somehow required to build a perfect heaven. He says he would rather return the ticket to paradise than be part of a plan that demands that price. That sentiment shakes something deep in many who read it, because it dares to question whether even redemption is worth it, if it rests on pain that was never chosen. There is also the strange paradox that those who suffer innocently often carry more empathy than those who have not. A person who has been wounded without cause sometimes becomes the gentlest hand in a room. It is as if the world tried to break them, but failed to erase their humanity. This makes their suffering even more unbearable to witness, because their goodness is not a shield. It is what makes their pain feel heavier. We try to find meaning in their pain. We say it builds character, that it inspires others, that it brings people together. And sometimes it does. But that does not undo the wound. Meaning is not a balm. It is a story we tell to keep going, and sometimes that story is not enough. Psychologically, the suffering of the innocent also haunts us because it destabilizes our sense of safety. If bad things can happen to good people, then the world is not predictable. And if the world is not predictable, then our lives are not under our control. That is a frightening realization. So instead, people often find ways to blame the victim, to say they must have done something wrong. Because if we can believe that, then we can still believe we are safe. But deep down, we know the truth. We know that suffering does not distribute itself based on who deserves it. We know that chance plays a crueler role than we want to admit. And we know that facing this truth makes us feel small. Yet in that smallness, there is also something powerful. When we recognize the suffering of the innocent not as a puzzle to solve, but as a reality to witness, we become more human. We begin to carry a sorrow that is not ours, and yet it reshapes us. This sorrow is not weakness. It is the price of being awake in a world that does not promise comfort. Some philosophers argue that this awareness is the first step toward moral maturity, to hold the suffering of others in your mind without needing to justify it or look away, to sit with the discomfort and let it burn away the layers of selfishness and denial. This is not an answer. It is a responsibility, one that does not heal the pain but honors it. Even in silence, the suffering of the innocent speaks. It speaks of systems that fail, of cruelty that hides in plain sight, of lives broken before they begin. But it also speaks of resilience, of the quiet strength in those who endure, of the love that sometimes emerges in the darkest corners, and of the need for us to be better. Because while we may not be able to stop all suffering, we can choose not to add to it. We can choose to notice, to care, to act in small ways that carry weight. And perhaps in doing so we become less blind to the pain around us. Perhaps we begin to see clearly, not just the suffering, but the fragile beauty that still tries to exist within it. Inescapable consciousness. Imagine waking up in a room with no doors and no windows. The light is neither bright nor dim, just constant. You cannot remember how you got there. The room is silent, yet you are not alone. There is something with you. Not a person, not an object. It is your own mind. It speaks without sound. It sees without eyes. It questions everything and accepts nothing. It watches you as you try to escape, but there is nowhere to go. That is the beginning of inescapable consciousness. What if you are not living inside the world, but inside a thought that the world is having? What if your sense of self, your memories, your desires, even your pain, are not yours, but part of a larger awareness that is simply observing itself through you? Many people live their whole lives assuming they are the center of their experience, that their thoughts are private, their feelings unique, and their story unfolding only for them. But what if the mind is not a container but a reflection? What if your every decision is not a creation but a ripple in something deeper? You may believe you are thinking, but consider the possibility that thought is thinking you. Sit quietly for a moment and observe what happens. Thoughts arise on their own. You do not summon them. They appear like whispers from another room, a memory of a friend, a plan for tomorrow, a sudden feeling of worry. You did not choose these things. They arrived. So who is choosing? Who is watching them arrive? If you try to silence the thoughts, you will notice they resist. They multiply. They get louder. They distract. It is not easy to control something you did not create. And yet, something in you keeps watching. This watcher is not your name. It is not your job. It is not your body or your voice or your reputation. It is not your goals or even your identity. It is the part of you that has always been there, even when the roles changed. The part that was there when you were a child, looking up at the stars and wondering where dreams come from. The part that was there when you cried the first time love left your life. The part that stood silently while your world was falling apart, and you could not explain why you still felt like someone was listening inside. That is not a voice. That is not a thought. That is consciousness. Now imagine this. You are sitting in front of a mirror, but instead of showing your face, it shows everything you have ever experienced. It shows your triumphs. It shows your failures. It shows your fears, your secrets, your regrets, and you cannot look away. The mirror reflects not just what you are, but what you cannot escape. You are not just looking at yourself. You are looking at the awareness that is looking. You are caught in a loop. You see the seer. You know the knower. You feel the one who is feeling. There is no step back to take. Wherever you go, you are still watching. That is the trap of awareness. Even in sleep, you do not escape. Dreams are the theater of your consciousness trying on new masks. You might believe you are someone else, somewhere else, but the dream still happens inside you. Even nightmares are yours. Even silence is yours. You cannot find a place outside yourself because everything happens within the field of consciousness. The thoughts, the sights, the feelings, even the search for peace. All of it unfolds inside the very thing you are trying to understand. You are trying to catch the wind with your hands, but your hands are made of wind. Some people spend their lives trying to escape the mind, through distraction, through intoxication, through obsession, through denial. But none of these offer freedom. They are only disguises. You can change the furniture in the room, but you are still in the room. You can close your eyes, but you are still seeing something. You can stop speaking, but the inner voice does not stop. That is why peace is not found by running. It is found by turning toward the watcher, not resisting it, not fearing it, just noticing it, sitting with it, letting it be what it is. But even that is not escape. It is surrender. It is the beginning of accepting that you are not outside your awareness. You are inside it. You are made of it. You are the dream and the dreamer. You are the voice and the listener. You are the pain and the one who feels it. That is why nothing ever feels complete, because you are not meant to finish the story. You are meant to keep witnessing it. You are not a chapter. You are the page on which all chapters are written. Now think of this. A thought appears. You see it. You think it. You identify with it. Then it fades, but you remain. Then another thought comes. It too fades, yet you remain. Always. So what are you if not the thoughts? You are the space between them, the silence that holds their sound, the canvas that never gets covered, even when the painting is finished. That is the part you cannot turn off. You can distract it, you can dull it, but you cannot delete it, because you are it. Inescapable consciousness is not a punishment. It is a truth. It is not a cage. It is a mirror that shows you what you are made of. And if you look long enough, if you stop running from yourself and simply watch the watcher, something strange begins to happen. The fear fades, the identity softens, the labels drop, and all that is left is presence, not a person, not a story, just presence, pure, unmoving, eternal. You were never trying to escape consciousness. You were trying to escape the noise. But the noise lives inside you, and the silence does too. In the end, what remains is this simple knowing that never leaves, never hides, never sleeps. It is always here, even now. As you read these words, as you feel the breath move in and out, as you listen to that soft hum behind your thoughts, that is what you have always been. That is what you cannot escape. Not because it traps you, but because it is you. The absurd contract. Picture yourself waking up in a strange room. There is no one around, no explanation, no memory of how you got there. On the table in front of you is a piece of paper. It is blank, but there is a pen beside it. You are expected to sign. You do not know the terms, you do not know the cost, but the expectation is clear. To exist in this room, you must sign something you do not understand. This is the absurd contract. And every human being signs it the moment they become aware of their own life. The absurd is not a joke. It is a condition. It happens when the human mind searches for meaning in a world that does not offer any. The philosopher Albert Camus described this tension as a confrontation between the human desire for clarity and the indifferent silence of the universe. We ask why we are here. We ask what we are meant to do. And instead of answers, we get time. We get chance. We get suffering and beauty mixed together in patterns too large to decode. We did not choose to be born. We did not agree to these rules. And yet, we are here, thinking, breathing, feeling. And somewhere along the way, we begin to act as if life owes us something, as if there is a reason why we suffer and a reward waiting if we endure it well. But the absurd contract does not promise justice. It does not promise fairness. It offers only one certainty. You are here, and you must decide what to do with that. This is not a comforting thought. It strips away the stories we use to guide ourselves. It leaves us exposed to a kind of inner vertigo. If nothing outside of us provides meaning, then the burden falls entirely on us, and that can be terrifying, because it means there are no guarantees, no divine scorekeeper, no script we can follow with certainty, only choices that matter because we give them weight. Some respond to this realization with despair. If life has no built-in meaning, then why live at all? Camus called this the fundamental question of philosophy. Is suicide a logical response to the absurd? But he did not stop there. He believed that once we see the absurd clearly, we have a second option. We can revolt, not by fighting the universe, but by refusing to be crushed by its silence. We can choose to live anyway, to create beauty and kindness and love in a world that does not require it. This is the quiet power hidden in the absurd contract. You do not get to choose the conditions of your existence, but you do get to choose your stance toward them. You can live with your eyes open. You can stop pretending there is a grand answer around the corner. You can begin to shape your life not as a reaction, but as a deliberate creation. Still, this awareness does not come without pain. It means watching others suffer for no reason. It means knowing that effort does not always lead to reward, that good people fail, that bad people succeed, that life can seem like a stage with no director. And yet, we keep moving, we keep loving, we keep hoping. That tension is the essence of the absurd. There is also another kind of burden in this contract. If the world does not assign meaning to your life, then you must be the author. And being the author means making decisions that define you. It means owning your mistakes. It means carrying regret. It means creating values that might be rejected by others, and it means standing by them anyway. The absurd contract does not ask for belief. It does not care if you agree. It is written into the very structure of consciousness. You are aware. You are limited. You will die. And in between, you must act. Even doing nothing is a kind of action. Even silence has consequences. What makes this contract disturbing is not just its terms. It is the fact that most people never realize they signed it. They move through life believing in the stories they inherited. That love always wins. That hard work guarantees success. That pain has a purpose. And sometimes those stories help. But when they collapse, the silence underneath can be deafening. That silence is the voice of the absurd. It does not accuse. It does not comfort. It simply exists, waiting to be noticed. And once it is, you cannot unsee it. You begin to feel it in the background of every decision, in the quiet moments, in the strange sense of detachment that creeps in during routines. You realize that your life is a performance, and the audience is also you. So what now? If the absurd is real, if the contract cannot be returned, what does it mean to live well? Camus offered a simple answer. Live with awareness. Do not look away. Do not pretend the world makes sense when it does not. Instead, love it as it is, in all its beauty and terror. Laugh not because life is funny, but because it is defiant. Choose passion not because it lasts, but because it matters while it does. Be kind not because you expect it to return to you, but because you want to leave something behind that is better than what you found. In a strange way, the absurd contract gives you more freedom than any religion or ideology, because it does not limit you to what is prescribed. It invites you to invent, to explore, to live without the safety net of certainty. That freedom is heavy, but it is also sacred. The absurd does not have to be your enemy. It can be a companion, a reminder that your life is yours alone, that the absence of meaning is not a curse, but a blank page, that your time is not measured by what you achieve, but by how fully you live in the face of the unknown. You are here. You did not ask to be, but you are, and that presence is not a mistake. It is a starting point, a place from which to write, to feel, to reach out in the dark and say, I am still here. I do not know what this is. but I will live it anyway. The horror of eternal recurrence. Imagine you are walking through your life, moment by moment, thinking that time moves forward like a river. Every second you live feels like a step closer to something new, a destination, a future that has not yet been written. But what if this was not true? What if, instead of a river flowing forward, your life was a circle, and every moment you are living right now, you have lived before? Not just once, but an infinite number of times. The same breath, the same blink, the same thoughts, the same mistakes, over and over, without end. This is not just a strange idea. It is a thought that has disturbed the minds of deep thinkers for centuries. Most famously, it was the philosopher Nietzsche who brought it into the spotlight. He asked a haunting question. If a demon whispered to you that you would have to live this life again and again for eternity, every joy and every sorrow, every high and every low, every unspoken word, every regret, and every moment of love, would you fall to the ground and curse that demon? Or would you embrace your life so completely that you would say yes to it forever? Think about that for a moment. This moment right now, the way you are breathing, the thoughts in your head, the feeling in your chest, the memories behind you and the worries ahead. What if this exact state will return again and again for all of eternity? Not a version of it, not a similar path, but this very moment, down to every detail. You may feel a chill at that thought, not because it sounds like hell, but because it sounds too real. Because if it were true, you would be trapped. Trapped not in a nightmare, but in yourself. Eternal recurrence is not about time travel or science fiction. It is not a story about technology or magic. It is a psychological mirror. It reflects what you truly believe about the value of your choices. If you were to live this life on repeat, would you change anything? Would you treat people differently? Would you speak your truth more often? Or would you still do what you are doing now, hoping the consequences will fade with time? The horror of eternal recurrence is not in the repetition itself. It is in the realization that you have been sleepwalking through a life you are doomed to relive forever. Now imagine waking up in your bed, thinking it is a new day. You stretch, you check your phone, you drink your coffee, but something feels strange. A conversation feels too familiar. A face on the street seems like a shadow from your dream. You have the sense that you have said these words before, that this day has happened, and maybe, just maybe, you are not imagining it. Maybe your soul is remembering something your mind cannot grasp. Maybe the loop is not in time, but in consciousness. If this moment is eternal, what does that mean for your suffering? That every heartbreak will return, that every grief will rise again, that every failure will repeat, but so will every laugh, every hug, every quiet moment when you felt peace without reason. Eternal recurrence is both terrifying and beautiful. It depends on how you have lived. If your days are filled with meaning, then their return is a gift. If your days are filled with emptiness, then their return is a curse. That is why this idea is not just about philosophy. It is about how you choose to live now. You might ask, how is this different from any other fear? Fear of death, fear of failure, fear of meaninglessness. But this fear is unique because it removes the escape. You cannot die and be done. You cannot fail and move on. You cannot wait for redemption in another life. If eternal recurrence is true, then this life is the test, the answer, and the punishment all in one. That is why it feels like a spiritual trap, because it confronts you with the weight of your own patterns, the lies you tell yourself, the routines you cannot break, the people you hurt without realizing. All of it will return, again and again. There is no judge in this idea, no God to forgive, no devil to blame, just a cycle, and you are both the creator and the prisoner of it. That is the most painful part, knowing that the life you complain about is the life you are destined to live again. not because of some cosmic punishment, but because of your own unwillingness to change. You chose it, and you keep choosing it. So what happens when you take this idea seriously? It changes how you see everything. Every action becomes sacred. Every second becomes a seed. You begin to act as if you will meet this moment again. You speak more kindly. You pay attention. You stop wasting time because you realize time never really ends. It just returns. You begin to live with intensity, not because you fear death, but because you fear meaningless repetition. Eternal recurrence is not meant to scare you into silence. It is meant to wake you into purpose, to make you feel the deep responsibility of your existence. It asks you to look at your life and ask, if I had to do this forever, would I be proud of it? Would I be able to smile in the face of eternity? Or would I crumble under the weight of my own choices? And the truth is, you do not need to believe in the literal return of your life for this idea to be powerful, because, in a way, you are already repeating yourself. You think the same thoughts, you fight the same battles, you feel the same wounds, and until you change the pattern, it will feel like the same life again and again, even within one lifetime. You can move cities, change jobs, start relationships. But if you are the same inside, the recurrence is already happening. So how do you escape? Maybe you do not. Maybe escape is not the answer. Maybe the answer is to become so conscious of your actions that each one becomes a deliberate choice, a moment you would gladly live again. Maybe freedom is not in breaking the cycle, but in embracing it with open eyes, living not in fear of repetition, but in the wisdom of it. In the end, eternal recurrence is a mirror. It does not change what you are, it reveals it. And if what it reveals is too painful, then that pain is your invitation, not to run, but to return. Return to your values. Return to your truth. Return to your responsibility as the author of your own loop. The horror of eternal recurrence is not that life never ends. It is that you might waste it, again and again. So ask yourself, right now, would you live this moment again? Would you repeat this thought, this silence, this breath, forever? If the answer is no, then let that discomfort move you, not into panic, but into presence. Because the only way to break the horror is to live in a way that you would not fear to live forever. The horror of eternal recurrence. Imagine someone walks up to you, calmly, with a serious look in their eyes. They say nothing at first. Then, slowly, they ask you one question. What if you had to live this exact life over again, exactly as it is, not once, but forever? Every joy, every mistake, every shame, every dull moment, every breath. What if none of it could be changed, and you would relive it again and again, without end, without memory, without escape? Would you collapse from the weight of that idea, or would you find the strength to accept it? This idea is not new. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche called it eternal recurrence. It is not about heaven or hell. It is not a reward or a punishment. It is simply a loop, a world that spins on repeat forever. Everything you do, every word you speak, every feeling you hide, all of it destined to happen again, not in a metaphorical way, not as a poetic reflection, but literally, over and over again. At first, the idea sounds abstract, a philosophical curiosity, but if you sit with it, truly sit with it, it begins to change the way you see everything. The small things take on a strange gravity. The arguments, the regrets, the quiet nights you wasted scrolling through nothing, they are not gone. They are waiting to come back. And the things you love, the laughter, the people you touched, the choices you made that felt right even when no one was watching, those will return too. But the idea is not comforting. It is terrifying, because it strips you of any sense of closure. You do not get to learn and improve. You do not get to fix your past. You do not even get the relief of forgetting. Everything is already written. The horror is not that life ends, it is that it never does. The horror is not death, but repetition. In this eternal loop, time is not a line, it is a circle, a perfect, suffocating circle. There is no final judgment, no ultimate justice, only the same sequence of events, replayed with brutal accuracy. And you, stuck inside it, convinced each time that you are moving forward, unaware that you are walking in circles. Nietzsche did not propose this idea to frighten. He offered it as a test of your life. If you heard that you would live this life forever, would you scream in despair, or would you welcome it as a sign that you lived well? Would you curse the universe, or would you smile, knowing that even your pain was worth repeating? This is where the concept becomes truly disturbing. Not because of what it says about time, but because of what it demands from you. It asks you to live as if you will live forever, but only this exact life. No restarts, no changes. Just you, again and again. It is the heaviest kind of responsibility, and most of us fail that test. Not because we are bad, but because we live in fragments. We live in ways that depend on endings. We hurt others and say we will change later. We waste days because we think there are more coming. We lie, we hide, we drift, we settle, because we assume this is just one version of us, that there will be a second draft. Eternal recurrence shatters that illusion. It tells you there is no second draft, only the same draft, forever. This forces a question that is hard to answer. Can you affirm your own life? All of it? Can you accept not only the things you love, but also the things you wish had never happened? The betrayals, the losses, the days when you failed yourself. Can you say yes to them too? This yes is not a passive acceptance. It is an active, burning yes. A yes that looks directly at the suffering and still says, I will live it again. A yes that does not flinch from the parts of yourself you want to forget. That is what Nietzsche called the ultimate act of strength. Not dominating others, not conquering the world, but affirming it, even in its worst moments. Of course, most of us will not be able to say that yes, not now, maybe not ever, and that is what makes this idea so unsettling. It is not just a thought experiment, it is a mirror. It shows you the parts of your life you are trying to outrun, the truths you bury, the people you abandoned, the love you turned away from out of fear. All of it is part of the loop. All of it will return. Some try to escape this horror by denying it. They say it is just a theory. That time is linear. That physics does not support it. But the power of the idea does not come from whether it is true. It comes from what it reveals. Whether the universe is built on circles or not, your life still echoes. In your habits, in your patterns, in the way you treat people. You live recurrence every day. Think about the way you respond to pain, the way you respond to boredom, the way you reach for comfort instead of growth. These are loops. These are tiny eternities inside you. You are already repeating. The only question is whether you are doing it blindly or with your eyes open. There is one last turn in this idea, a cruel twist. What if someone else is living your life too? What if in another version of this loop, someone else wakes up as you, with no memory, destined to feel everything you felt, to walk the same roads, to cry the same tears? Would you want that for them? Would you want anyone to live your life exactly as it is? That question can break you, or it can awaken you. If you would not wish your life on another soul, then maybe it is time to live differently, not out of fear, but out of care, for yourself, for the echo of yourself, for the stranger who may walk your path. Eternal recurrence does not need to be true for it to matter. It matters because it dares you to live with intention. It matters because it demands that your life be worth living, even if you had to live it again forever. That is the challenge. That is the horror. That is the invitation. The void behind free will Picture this. You are standing at a crossroads. Two paths stretch before you, one to the left, one to the right. You pause, you think, you weigh your options. Then, you take a deep breath and step forward. You believe you made a choice, a conscious decision. You believe it was yours. But what if it was not? What if every step you have taken, every preference you hold, every desire that moves you, has been shaped by something deeper that you cannot see? What if the feeling of choice is just a shadow cast by something hidden? Most of us live with the belief that we are the authors of our lives. That when we choose chocolate over vanilla, or turn down one job for another, or speak our minds instead of staying silent, we are exercising our free will, that we are in control, that we are deciding. But the more you look at this idea, the more it begins to shake. Ask yourself, where do your thoughts come from? Do you create them, or do they arrive? When you feel pulled towards something, did you choose the pull, or did it simply appear inside you, like a whisper from somewhere you do not understand? Free will feels natural. It feels obvious. But so does the feeling that the sun moves across the sky until you realize it is the earth that is turning. Just because something feels true does not mean it is. And when you begin to watch your mind closely, you start to notice something strange. You do not choose your next thought. It just happens. You do not choose your preferences. You like what you like. You do not choose your fears. They rise up on their own. And yet, you believe you are steering this ship. But what if the ship has no captain? What if you are a passenger, watching the waves, feeling the wind, believing that your hand on the wheel is guiding the course, when in truth, the current below is doing all the work? The idea of free will gives us comfort. It gives us meaning. It lets us take pride in our victories and responsibility for our failures. It makes justice possible. It makes purpose real. But under that comfort may be a quiet truth we do not want to face. That we are being lived more than we are living. Now imagine a moment from your past when you made a big decision. Something that changed your path. Maybe you moved to a new city, left someone you loved, chose a career. Think about what led you there, the people who influenced you, the events that shaped you, the fears that pushed you, the dreams that pulled you. Now ask yourself, could you have done it any differently? Not in theory, but in reality. In that exact moment, with that exact mind, that exact emotion, that exact history, were you truly free to choose anything else? When we say we could have chosen differently, we speak from the present, with new thoughts, with new information, but in that past moment, you only had what you had. You could only see what you saw. You could only feel what you felt. So was there ever really another option? Or was the path always unfolding as it had to? This is the void behind free will, not emptiness, but invisibility, the hidden chain of causes that leads to every choice we think we make. Some say, even if we do not control the first thought, we can choose how to respond. But even the response is a thought. Even the will to resist is born from something, a belief, a value, a personality trait. And where did those come from? Did you choose your childhood, your genetics, the books you read, the things that shaped your character? They came to you. Like rain on a roof, like wind through trees, they shaped you. And now you move through life thinking you are the wind when you are the leaf being carried. This does not mean you are nothing. It does not mean your actions do not matter. It means your actions are part of something much larger than you, something that flows through time and memory and experience, something that cannot be owned. You are the river, not the one who pours the water. And if you truly see this, it can feel terrifying, like losing your grip on the story of your life, like falling through the floor of identity. But it can also feel like peace, because if you are not the author, then you can stop blaming yourself. You can stop pretending you are broken. You can stop trying to control what was never yours to control. And in that letting go, you find something unexpected, stillness, awareness. Not the kind of awareness that chooses, but the kind that watches. The kind that sees thoughts come and go. That watches feelings rise and fall. That notices the story unfolding without trying to rewrite it. And in that space, something deeper than free will begins to appear. Not control, but clarity. Not choice, but understanding. You begin to live more gently, more honestly. You stop saying, "I should have known better," because you realize you could not have. You stop punishing others for their choices because you see the machinery behind their actions. You stop holding on to guilt like a badge and instead begin to see your pain as a reflection of unseen causes. This is not escape. This is not passivity. This is a shift in how you relate to yourself. Free will may be a useful illusion. It may help society function. It may keep order and allow for growth. But behind it, in the quiet space of awareness, there is a vastness, a void that does not judge, that does not choose, that simply is. And when you touch that space, you no longer need to force your way through life. You begin to flow with it. You begin to trust what appears, not because you control it, but because you are part of it. So the next time you feel proud of a choice or ashamed of a mistake, pause. Ask yourself, did I truly choose this? Or did it arise from the endless causes that shaped me? And then ask, what happens if I stop trying to control every moment and instead start witnessing it? What happens if I stop trying to be the one who moves and instead become the one who sees? The void behind free will is not emptiness. It is freedom from the illusion of control. And in that freedom, you may finally touch something real, something still, something that has always been watching. Even before you believed you were the one deciding. Epistemic isolation. Imagine being inside a room with no windows, no doors, and no way to reach the outside. But in this room, you have books, screens, voices, all feeding you information about the world outside. You never leave. You never meet anyone directly. You only receive what is sent in. Over time, you begin to feel like you know the world. You form beliefs. You defend them. You argue in your mind with imagined others. But the truth is, you are still alone in that room. This is what epistemic isolation feels like. And the disturbing part is that most of us live like this without even knowing it. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, of how we come to know what we know, and at the heart of it is a haunting problem. We only ever see the world through our own eyes. Our beliefs are built from our experiences, our environment, our upbringing, our fears. Even when we think we are being objective, we are still looking through a lens shaped by countless personal filters. No matter how much information we consume, it is still processed by one mind, one perspective, one isolated point in a vast and complex world. This leads to the problem of isolation, not physical isolation, but cognitive isolation, the inability to truly see the world as others see it, the inability to verify what is real without relying on our own mind, which is already limited. You may speak to another person, you may even agree, but their mind is a closed room too. You cannot enter it. You cannot test their experiences directly. You are always looking through a pane of glass, trying to understand something that remains just out of reach. This isolation becomes even more unsettling when we consider how often we assume we know the truth. We argue, we judge, we dismiss, we cling to our beliefs as if they were carved in stone. But what if those beliefs are just echoes of our own room? What if the truth is something we cannot access, simply because of how we are built? The philosopher Thomas Nagel once asked what it is like to be a bat. Not in terms of behavior, but experience. He argued that even if we could study every detail of a bat's brain and body, we would still not know what it feels like to be one. That inner world is locked. And if we cannot even understand the consciousness of a bat, what makes us think we truly understand other people, let alone the universe? This problem touches every part of life. When you read a book, you see the story through your own background. When you watch the news, You interpret it through your own values. When you listen to someone speak, you filter their words through your emotional state. Even your memories are not safe. They change over time, reshaped by current moods and past regrets. Nothing enters the mind untouched. Everything is translated. And in that translation, something is always lost. Some people try to break this isolation by seeking consensus. They believe that if enough people agree on something, it must be true. But consensus can be built on shared illusions, on inherited biases, on social pressure. The loudest voices often shape the dominant narratives, but volume is not the same as truth. And when you step outside the mainstream, you find that others have built entire realities based on different assumptions. Who is right? How would we even know? This is the core of epistemic isolation. Not just that we are alone in our minds, but that there is no perfect bridge between them. Language helps, but it is imprecise. Science helps, but it is limited by current tools and perspectives. Empathy helps, but it is often filtered through our own pain. Every attempt to connect is partial. Every claim to truth is vulnerable. Now imagine what this means for morality, for justice, for love. If we are isolated in how we see and know the world, how can we be certain we are treating others fairly? How can we be sure our good intentions are truly good? Sometimes people act with the belief that they are helping, only to discover later that their help caused harm. Sometimes people judge others based on assumptions that were never questioned. The isolation of knowing means that we must always hold our views gently, always leave room for doubt, always recognize that we do not see the full picture. This can feel paralyzing. If we cannot know anything for sure, how do we act? How do we live? The answer is not to retreat into silence. It is not to abandon all beliefs. It is to move forward with humility. To recognize that certainty is a luxury we do not really have. To listen more deeply. To question more often. To understand that disagreement is not always a threat, but a signal that our rooms are shaped differently. In relationships, this awareness becomes a kind of grace. Instead of demanding to be understood, we begin to appreciate how hard it is to truly know anyone. Instead of assuming others are wrong, we begin to wonder what we might be missing. This softens us, makes us slower to anger, quicker to ask, more willing to sit in the discomfort of not knowing. Even in the pursuit of knowledge, this humility matters. The most dangerous thinkers are often the most certain, the ones who believe they have found the answer and no longer need to listen. But real wisdom comes from those who remain curious, who understand that their mind is not the universe, that their lens is not the whole map, that to learn is to be corrected. Epistemic isolation does not have to end in despair. It can become the soil for growth. It reminds us that we are not the center. That truth is not something we own, but something we approach. That people are not puzzles to be solved, but mysteries to be respected. We may never fully escape the rooms we live in, but we can build windows. We can speak carefully. We can listen patiently. We can learn to notice when our own beliefs are standing in the way. And in doing so, we create the possibility of something rare. Not perfect knowledge, but honest connection. The ethics of non-existence. Imagine you are standing before a door. Behind it lies a version of the world where you were never born. No footprints in the sand, no name in the memories of others, no laughter, no suffering. Just absence, stillness, silence. What would that world look like? Would it be emptier, or would it carry on unchanged, as if you were never meant to arrive in the first place? And if you had the choice, knowing everything your existence would bring into this world, would you still open the door and step in? This is the heart of a deep and quiet question, one that lingers in the background of human thought, often unspoken, but always present. Is it right to bring someone into existence, knowing that with life comes pain? Can it ever be good to create what can suffer? Or is there a certain kind of kindness in nothingness, a mercy in the choice to not create life that did not ask to be created? At first, this question sounds like a shadow, cold, detached. But the more you think about it, the more it opens. Because it is not just about birth, it is about responsibility, about choice, about ethics. It asks not what is possible, but what is right. And right for whom? The person who does not exist yet cannot complain. But once they are here, they must live with everything that comes with it. Hunger, confusion, loneliness, loss. Is it fair to hand someone this burden without asking? There is a philosophy called antinatalism that grows from this very place. It says that bringing a person into the world is not a neutral act. It is a decision that creates the conditions for harm, not because life is only pain, but because pain is unavoidable. You cannot promise a life without suffering. You cannot guarantee happiness. And since the person you are creating did not consent to being here, you are making that choice for them. Out of love, perhaps, but also out of a silence that cannot be broken, because the unborn have no voice. Now imagine this. A man holds in his hands the ability to create a child. He is healthy. He is stable. He believes in the beauty of life, but he also remembers the nights he cried alone, the mistakes he made, the moments when he felt lost in a world that did not seem to care. He wonders if he is creating someone who will carry joy, or someone who will quietly suffer through years of invisible weight. He cannot know, but he must choose. This is not a question of pessimism. It is a question of honesty. Can we truly give someone the gift of life if that gift is wrapped in uncertainty, in struggle, in death? We speak of birth as a celebration, but what are we celebrating? The beginning of what will surely include pain, the beginning of a journey that ends in disappearance. We do not ask to be here. Yet we are told to be grateful, but gratitude cannot erase the question, why bring someone here at all? Some say life is worth it because of love, because of laughter, because of art and discovery and sunsets and the soft touch of a friend's hand. These things are real. They matter. But can they outweigh the moments of despair? They're just as real. When someone loses a child, when hunger gnaws, when depression makes the days feel like chains, when grief hollowed out a heart and no answer came, can we be sure that what we call beautiful is enough to justify the weight we give others to carry? And still, the world continues. People have children every day, out of hope, out of tradition, out of the desire to see themselves live on. But none of these reasons erase the responsibility. To bring someone into existence is to bind them to a future they did not shape. It is to invite them into a world of sharp edges and uncertain endings. We do not think of it that way, because the silence before birth cannot argue with us. But what if it could? Imagine a voice speaking from the void, a voice that says, I did not ask for this. I did not want to feel heartbreak. I did not want to watch my parents grow old and die. I did not want to carry the weight of expectations. I did not want to hurt, and yet here I am, created, existing. Without my permission, how would you answer that voice? You might say, but there is beauty too. There is music. There is meaning. There is friendship and poetry and moments of peace that feel like sunlight on the soul. But the voice would respond, I never asked for those either. I never asked to experience anything at all. And so, no gift can erase the fact that I never consented to the risk. The ethics of non-existence is not about being against life. It is about recognizing that life is not just light. It is shadow too. It is about understanding that creation is a moral act, that every child born will suffer in some way, that every life will carry sorrow, and that the one who chooses to create must accept that truth. It also brings a deeper reflection. If we take seriously the pain in life, then we are called to make life kinder. If we are to create, then we must create carefully, thoughtfully. We must build a world where those we bring into being can find shelter, can find purpose, can find rest, and maybe, Just maybe, if we do that, the silence behind non-existence will not feel like an accusation, but like a mirror, a reminder that life is not something to take for granted. That birth is not just a beginning, it is a promise, and every promise carries a weight. So the next time you hear someone speak of having a child, or if you find yourself wondering whether to bring a new life into this world, pause, not to say no, not to judge, but to reflect, to hold the silence, to ask the question, am I ready to take responsibility for the story I might begin? Am I aware of what it means to invite someone into the world of time and pain and wonder? And can I live with the truth that once that choice is made, it cannot be unmade? The ethics of non-existence is not about darkness. It is about awareness. It is the quiet question behind every cradle, behind every wish to create. It asks not if life can be good, but if we are willing to carry the responsibility of giving it. And in that question, we may find not fear, but depth, not guilt, but care. And maybe, in that care, we create not just life, but love that is honest, a love that sees all, a love that understands what it means to choose. Involuntary sentience. Picture this. You wake up in a body you never asked for. The light stings your eyes. You hear sounds, feel sensations, and slowly begin to become aware. But you did not choose this. You did not request to be born. You did not agree to consciousness. It simply arrived, uninvited, and now you are stuck with it. That is the starting point of every human life. We do not enter the world through permission. We are thrown into it, wide awake, already experiencing. And that awareness never fully goes away. This is the dilemma of involuntary sentience. Sentience means the ability to feel, to notice, to experience. It is the thread that makes pain possible, but also beauty. It is what lets you enjoy music, suffer through grief, laugh with someone you love, and be crushed by loneliness. It is what makes you feel afraid in the dark and safe in someone's arms. But it is not something you chose. It is something that happened to you. From the moment you became conscious, you were placed into a system you could not control. Your name was chosen. Your language was already spoken. Your beliefs were handed down. Your world was filtered through what others decided to show you. And before you even had the ability to question it, your brain began forming connections, patterns, fears, habits, all based on things you never asked to be exposed to. This is the part of life no one wants to talk about, the fact that you are aware, and you cannot turn it off. You cannot close your mind the way you close your eyes. You cannot unsee your own suffering. You cannot escape your own thoughts completely. Even in sleep, your mind keeps turning. You dream, you remember, you fear, you long. Sentience is a gift, but it is also a trap. A beautiful, terrifying trap that you had no choice in entering. This idea becomes even more haunting when you think about suffering, because pain too is rooted in sentience. A rock cannot suffer. A tree does not feel shame. But a human being can be destroyed by their own thoughts. They can relive a moment of embarrassment from 10 years ago and still feel the heat in their chest. They can imagine the death of someone they love and feel real sorrow. They can spiral into fear, not because something is happening, but because something might happen. And all of this is possible because they are aware. This awareness does not just sit quietly. It moves, it digs, it questions, it wants answers. But the universe does not give clear ones. And so the mind keeps asking, who am I? Why am I here? What should I do? And worst of all, what if there is no answer? What if the awareness you carry is not part of some grand design, but just an accident of biology, a side effect of evolution that grew too loud? That is where the discomfort begins to grow. Because if your sentience is involuntary, and the world gives no promise of meaning, then what are you supposed to do with all this pain? What are you supposed to do with the fear, the shame, the doubt, the heartbreak, when you did not even agree to feel them in the first place. Some people try to numb this awareness. They stay busy. They chase pleasure. They fill their lives with noise and distraction. But sentience always returns. In the quiet, in the dark, in the middle of the night, when nothing is playing and no one is talking. That is when it creeps in. The reminder that you are awake in a body, on a planet, spinning in a universe you never chose, and you still have to keep going. Others try to give meaning to their sentience. They become creators, thinkers, lovers. They build systems of belief, or works of art, or communities of support. They take their unwanted awareness and shape it into something that gives them peace. This is beautiful, but it does not change the fact that they were forced to begin without consent, that they had to find meaning only after waking up to the terror of not having any. This feeling is often strongest in moments of despair. When someone says they did not ask to be born, they are not being dramatic. They are being precise. They are naming a truth that society tries to ignore. That life is not chosen. It is assigned. That consciousness is not a reward. It is a condition. And some people suffer under its weight far more than others. Mental illness can make this even more unbearable. Imagine being aware of your pain but unable to stop it, knowing that you are in a loop but still trapped inside it, feeling things that do not match your surroundings, wanting peace but unable to silence the storm in your head. That is sentience too. That is the part of being awake that no one celebrates. There is no off switch. You can distract, you can sedate, you can escape for moments, but you cannot unknow your own self. You cannot permanently hide from your own mind. And in this way, every conscious being carries a weight that is invisible but immense. A weight that they never asked to carry. Yet within this weight, there is something else, something strange. The very thing that makes pain possible is also what makes beauty meaningful. A flower has no emotion. A mountain does not feel awe, but a human does. Because they are sentient, because they are awake, and in being awake, they can choose to notice what is good. Even if they did not ask for the ability to notice at all. That is the strange paradox of involuntary sentience. It is both a burden and a miracle. It hurts. It heals. It traps. It frees. It is the reason we suffer, but also the reason we care. Without it, there would be no art, no love, no empathy, no reflection. But with it, we are vulnerable. We are breakable. We are never completely safe. So what do we do with this? If we cannot escape sentience, and we did not choose it, how do we live with it? Maybe the answer is not to fight it. Maybe the answer is to meet it like an old companion. One we did not invite, but one we must learn to live beside. Maybe we learn to carry it kindly, to notice what it shows us, to be gentle with ourselves for the moments when it hurts too much. Because even though we did not choose to be conscious, we can choose how we respond to that consciousness. We can choose to soften instead of harden, to connect instead of isolate, to create instead of collapse. And maybe, just maybe, that choice is where meaning begins. Lucid Insanity. Imagine waking up in a room that looks exactly like your own, but something is slightly off. The colors are too sharp. The air feels heavier. You look in the mirror, and your reflection stares back with just a second's delay. You speak, and the echo of your words answers before your voice finishes. You are awake. You are aware. You know what is happening, and yet something deep inside tells you that nothing is real. That is the start of lucid insanity. It begins like a whisper at the edge of consciousness. The quiet thought that what you believe to be normal may not be true at all, that reality is not solid, that your thoughts are not private, that the world you move through like a swimmer in water may be made of illusions you have helped create. Most people go mad without knowing it, but what happens when you become aware of the madness while still inside it? That is when clarity becomes its own kind of prison. Lucid insanity is not chaos. It is not rage or confusion. It is the calm and terrifying realization that your mind no longer fits the shape of the world. That logic still functions, but leads you to places no one else sees. That reason becomes a tool to dismantle reality itself. You see patterns everywhere. You feel meaning where others feel boredom. You hear the silence between words. You watch people laugh and wonder if they are acting, or if you are the only one who is not. There is a moment, a very strange moment, when you understand that what others call delusion is sometimes just a deeper kind of noticing. You notice that time does not flow the way it should, that memories loop, that dreams bleed into waking hours, that people repeat themselves as if following invisible scripts. You begin to ask questions, not aloud because you know how that would sound, but in your mind, quietly, endlessly. Why does everything feel so rehearsed? Why does the world bend slightly when no one is looking? And then you wonder if the madness is not yours but theirs. What if the insane are not the ones who see too much, but the ones who see too little? What if normality is the most elaborate performance of all, a shared hallucination, a stage play with invisible walls? What if everyone is pretending to be sane, and the only real insanity is admitting that something is deeply wrong? But even in that realization, you are not free. Because to be truly mad is to believe in illusions, and to be lucid is to see through them. But when you see through them and still cannot escape them, that is a different kind of suffering. It is like drowning in clear water. You see everything. You understand everything. But you are still sinking. You go through your day like everyone else. You buy food. You smile at strangers. You answer questions with polite nods. But behind your eyes, a different movie plays, a film that no one else can see. You are watching yourself, narrating your own actions, observing your own mind. And as this happens, a strange divide appears. One part of you lives, the other watches. One speaks, the other listens. One feels joy, the other questions it. You are split. And yet, you are whole. This is the paradox of lucid insanity, the mind that sees itself breaking apart but cannot stop the process. The mind that knows the difference between truth and delusion but no longer trusts either. You begin to question your own clarity. If you are so aware, why do you still feel lost? If you understand the illusion, why does it still control you? The awareness that should be your strength becomes your burden, and so you seek answers. You read, you meditate. You write long thoughts in notebooks that no one will ever read. You search for people who feel the same, but most cannot follow you. They nod, they sympathize, but they do not really understand. They are still inside the illusion, untouched by the storm that woke you up. And so you begin to feel lonely, not because you are alone, but because you are surrounded by people who are not seeing what you see. Some try to numb the awareness, with noise, with work, with pleasure, but you know that does not work, because the clarity always returns, the knowing, the sense that reality is thinner than it looks, that people's smiles do not reach their eyes, that their answers are memorized. You hear the script in their voice. You feel the emptiness behind their certainty. And you wonder if they are afraid too, but have simply forgotten. You start to notice that your thoughts no longer feel like yours. They echo back at you like voices from another room. You think something, and then wonder who thought it. You feel something, and then ask if it was truly your feeling or just another echo. The self becomes transparent. You can see through it. And once that happens, you cannot unsee it. You are no longer a person with thoughts. You are a mind watching thoughts pass by, like clouds drifting across an endless sky. Lucid insanity does not scream. It whispers. It tells you that the structure of your world is built on sand. It shows you the cracks in the foundation, and then it asks you to go on pretending as if nothing has changed. That is the cruel part. The world does not bend to your clarity. It demands your performance, even when you have seen behind the curtain. But there is something strangely beautiful in this madness, a stillness, a surrender. You begin to find peace not in control, but in acceptance. You stop trying to fix the illusion. You stop trying to escape the mind. You begin to float in the strange space between truth and untruth, between knowing and not knowing. You stop asking whether the world is real. You start living inside the question itself, and in that space, you find a different kind of sanity. Not the sanity of society, not the sanity of answers, but the sanity of presence, of quiet observation, of existing without needing everything to make sense. You begin to see beauty in the cracks, in the repetition, in the echo. You see life not as a puzzle to solve, but as a dance to watch. Lucid insanity is not a curse. It is a mirror. It reflects what we try to hide, our fear of chaos, our need for order, our silent agreement to believe in the dream even when we know we are dreaming. To live with this awareness is not to be broken. It is to be awake in a world that rewards sleep. So if you feel this way, if you feel the split, the watching, the endless questioning, know that you are not lost. You are simply aware in a world that prefers blindness. You are sane in a way that others do not yet understand. And your task is not to return to the old world, but to build a new relationship with it, one that does not demand comfort, one that allows mystery, one that honors the strange gift of being both awake and unanchored. Because sometimes the deepest truth is not found in certainty, but in the silence between questions. And that silence is where lucid insanity becomes something else, not madness, but a kind of quiet freedom, the burden of meaning. Picture this man sitting alone in a quiet cafe. He looks around at the people walking by, the sounds of cups clinking, the low hum of conversation, the warmth of sunlight on his face. Nothing is wrong, yet something feels heavy inside him. Not a pain, not a fear, but a strange weight pressing on his chest. He cannot name it at first, but then it begins to form in his mind like a whisper. What is the point of all this? Why am I here? What does any of this truly mean? This question is ancient. It slips quietly into the background of everyday life, hiding behind schedules, obligations, goals, and dreams. But eventually, it returns. It always returns. The search for meaning is not something we choose. It is something that rises within us the moment we become aware of our own existence. And the disturbing truth is that this search can become its own kind of suffering. We are not just creatures that live. We are creatures that ask why we live. And once that question enters the mind, it becomes difficult to silence. Some people fill their lives with religion, others with relationships. Some chase success, status, or legacy. Others pour themselves into art, activism, or family. But behind every action, behind every effort, there is often a quiet need for things to matter, for life to mean something more than survival. But meaning is not handed down like a gift. It does not arrive neatly wrapped and placed on your doorstep. It is built, piece by piece, through choices, through beliefs, through stories. And yet, every story we tell about why we exist can be questioned. Every belief can be challenged. Every source of comfort can crumble. And when it does, we are left staring into a kind of void. A space where we still want life to matter, but we no longer know how. This is the burden of meaning. It is not just the search itself. It is the weight of needing to find it. It is the pressure of creating purpose in a world that does not explain itself. It is the quiet panic that comes when we wonder whether our efforts are enough, whether our lives are being lived well, whether we are making a difference or just going through motions. The philosopher Viktor Frankl believed that humans can survive almost anything if they feel their life has meaning. He wrote this from inside a concentration camp, and yet even he admitted that meaning is not guaranteed. It must be discovered. And for many people, that discovery is painful, because meaning comes with expectations. If you believe your purpose is to help others, then you carry the weight of their suffering. If you believe your meaning comes from success, then failure becomes a kind of personal collapse. If you place your meaning in another person, then their absence becomes unbearable. And if you try to find meaning in everything, then every meaningless moment becomes a quiet wound. Some try to escape this burden by denying it. They say, life has no meaning, that we are just random particles moving through time. That meaning is an illusion created by a brain afraid of death. And maybe that is true. But even those who claim to reject meaning often live as if it exists. They still love, they still protect, they still mourn, which means that somewhere deep inside, they still want life to mean something. The burden does not disappear just because we stop talking about it. It moves beneath the surface. It shows up in our exhaustion, in our longing, in the fear that we are wasting our time, in the dread of becoming someone who never really lived. It is the reason some people feel lost even when they are surrounded by comfort, because comfort without meaning feels hollow, like a room full of beautiful things, but no one inside to feel them. This burden becomes even heavier in a world that promises too much. We are told we can be anything, do anything, change the world. And yet most of us live small, ordinary lives. We are not legends. We are not icons. We are people who wake up, try, stumble, and try again. And that is beautiful. But when meaning is tied to greatness, then the everyday begins to feel like a failure. So, what do we do with this burden? If meaning is so important, and yet so fragile, how do we carry it without being crushed by it? Maybe the answer is not to search for one grand meaning. Maybe it is to notice the small ones, the quiet moments of connection, the acts of kindness no one sees, the laughter shared with a friend, the care you give to a stranger. These things may not explain the universe, but they shape the space you live in. They make the day worth waking up for. Or maybe meaning is something you create, not something you find. It is not discovered like treasure. It is written like a journal, changed like a garden. It grows and dies and grows again. And in that movement, there is life, real life. Not the kind you put on display, but the kind you feel in your chest when the world slows down and you realize you are still here. The burden of meaning will never fully leave. It is part of what makes you human, but it does not have to destroy you. You can carry it with gentleness. You can stop demanding that every moment be important. You can let meaning be something that flows, not something that weighs. Something that rises naturally, like breath, not something that must always be proven. You are here. You are thinking. You are wondering why. And maybe the wonder itself is enough. Maybe the act of asking is already a kind of meaning, because only a living, feeling, conscious being could even think to ask such a question, and that, in itself, is something sacred. The mind-body discontinuity. Picture this. You are lying in bed, eyes closed, perfectly still. The room is quiet. Your breath is steady. And yet, inside your head, a storm is moving. Memories swirl. Thoughts race. Emotions shift like shadows. Your body is calm, but your mind is loud. You feel two worlds coexisting, the physical and the mental, the visible and the invisible. One rests. The other runs, and in that moment, you begin to wonder, are you one being or two? From the moment we are born, we are told that we are a body, that the body eats, the body moves, the body feels pain. And we are also told that we are a mind, that the mind thinks, the mind remembers, the mind decides. But where does one end and the other begin? If you cut your finger, your body bleeds, but your mind reacts. If you feel heartache, your chest tightens, but the pain is not made of muscle, it is made of something you cannot touch. So what connects these two parts of you, and what separates them? Many people live without questioning this split. They move through the world as if their body and mind are a single unit. But sometimes, life reveals the gap. A soldier who loses a limb still feels it in dreams. A person in depression feels heavy without lifting a thing. A runner pushes their body beyond what it should endure, because the mind says, keep going. The mind can ignore the body. The body can rebel against the mind. They live together, but not always in harmony. Now imagine this. A man sits in a chair. His body is still, but his thoughts are running like fire. He feels pain without injury, fear without threat, longing without touch. His mind is writing stories the body cannot understand. He smiles at someone, though his heart is breaking. He walks into a room, though he wishes to disappear. His body is present, but his mind is not. And no one can see it. That is the strangeness of being human. You can be seen without being known. You can look healthy while falling apart. This is the core of the mind-body discontinuity, the strange and often invisible space between the physical and the mental, the sense that who you are in your thoughts may not match what others see in your face, that your inner world may be more real to you than anything outside, that you are carrying a landscape inside your head, filled with voices and memories and dreams that your body cannot express. Think of a moment when you felt deep sadness, but your body did not cry, or when you laughed, but inside you were somewhere else. The body reacts to the world, but the mind reacts to meaning. You can be safe and still feel threatened. You can be surrounded by people and still feel alone. Because the mind creates experience, not just the senses. Some scientists say the mind is only what the brain does, that every thought is a chemical reaction, that every feeling is a pattern of neurons. But even if this is true, the experience of the mind feels different from the functions of the body. You can see a wound on your skin, but you cannot point to where a broken heart lives. You can measure blood pressure, but how do you measure sorrow? There are moments in life when this gap becomes undeniable, when your body cannot move, but your mind is alive, like during sleep paralysis, or under anesthesia, when you drift into darkness but wake up with the memory of dreaming, or during trauma, when your body acts out while your mind floats away. These are not just experiences. They are evidence that something in us stands apart from the flesh, that our identity is not fully contained in muscle or bone. Even in everyday life, we experience this split. You sit in a meeting nodding politely while inside your mind is screaming. You lie awake at night, tired to your bones, but your thoughts refuse to sleep. You tell yourself not to worry, but your stomach still twists. You know something is not real, but you still feel fear. The mind and body speak different languages, and sometimes they do not listen to each other. This is why healing is complex. You cannot treat the body alone. A pill may soothe symptoms, but it cannot rewrite the story in the mind, and you cannot treat the mind alone. A realization may bring clarity, but if the body is tense, peace does not arrive. True healing must cross the bridge between body and mind, and that bridge is not always easy to find. Meditation tries to close the gap. So does breathwork. So does art. So does deep conversation. These practices bring awareness to the body while calming the mind. They remind you that you are not just a machine of nerves and thoughts, but something in between, something watching both. You are not just your sensations. You are not just your ideas. You are the space that holds them both. This is also why identity can feel so fragile. If the body changes, the mind struggles. If the mind changes, the body reacts. They mirror each other, but never perfectly. And so we live in tension, trying to align what we feel inside with how we appear outside, trying to bring together what often feels torn apart. Some people believe that consciousness is separate from the body, that it survives beyond death, that the mind is a visitor, not a product. Others believe that when the brain ends, the self ends, that the mind is born from biology and dies with it. But even in that debate, the feeling remains that the mind moves differently. It dreams, it imagines, it regrets, it remembers. It creates futures that have not yet happened. The body cannot do these things. Only the mind can. So what does this mean for how we live? It means we must be kind to both parts of ourselves. We must listen to the body, but also care for the mind. We must move, rest, nourish, but also reflect, forgive, imagine. We must stop treating ourselves as machines that only need fuel, and we must stop treating ourselves as thoughts without flesh. We are both, always both. The mind-body discontinuity is not a flaw. It is a mystery, a tension we carry through our lives. And if we can learn to feel it without fear, to explore it with curiosity, we may begin to understand ourselves in a deeper way. We may begin to heal not just what is broken, but what is disconnected. And in that healing, we may find something whole, not just a mind, not just a body, but a being that lives in the space between, a quiet awareness that watches both, that feels both, that holds both. And that, somehow, is more than the sum of either. Ontological horror. Imagine waking up one day and everything feels the same. The walls of your room, the shape of your hands, the light falling through the curtains, but something is different. Not wrong exactly, just strange, as if the world is still here but no longer familiar. You touch the floor and wonder what it really is. You speak a word and suddenly it feels hollow. You look in the mirror and feel like you are seeing someone else. Not because of memory loss, not because of fear, but because something deep inside you has shifted. You no longer know what anything truly is. And this is not confusion, it is something else, a deeper, colder sensation. This is ontological horror. Ontology is the branch of philosophy that studies the nature of being. What does it mean to exist? What does it mean to be real? These questions sound simple at first, but when you truly explore them, they begin to fracture everything you thought was solid. Ontological horror is the feeling that arises when your basic assumptions about reality begin to dissolve. It is the terror that comes not from monsters or violence, but from the quiet collapse of the foundation that makes sense of the world. It begins when you question the most basic things. What is a person? What is a thought? What is space? What is this moment? These questions sound abstract, but they are not. Because everything you believe and everything you feel rests on the answers you carry for them. You trust that the world outside your mind is real, that other people have inner lives, that time is moving forward, that your memories point to something that actually happened. But none of this can be proven without first assuming that something exists. This is where the horror begins. When you realize that all meaning is built on layers of belief that cannot be fully confirmed. When you see that reality itself might be a construct shaped by your own consciousness. That your experience of life might not reflect what is truly there, and that maybe nothing is truly there in the way you imagine. It is different from paranoia. You are not afraid of being watched. You are afraid that no one is watching, that there is no observer, no structure, no hidden purpose, just existence, pure and raw, without meaning, without story, without comfort. It is the feeling that you are a character who suddenly became aware of the page you are written on. Sometimes this horror appears during moments of deep thought, sometimes in moments of silence. It might come when you look too long at your own reflection, or when you stare at the stars and realize the scale of what you are part of, or when you try to imagine what it really means for something to exist at all. The feeling creeps in slowly. It does not scream. It whispers. It asks questions you cannot answer, and then waits while you try. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once described a moment when he looked at the root of a tree, and suddenly it lost all meaning. It was just there, brutally present, without purpose or explanation. And in that moment, he felt something heavy, something unbearable. He called it nausea, but what he was touching was ontological horror. The shock of seeing the world not as we name it, but as it might really be, unnamed, unshaped, unknowable. This kind of horror is not loud. It does not chase you. It sits in the corner of your mind, waiting for you to look in its direction. And once you do, you cannot unsee it. You cannot return to the comfort of simple categories. You begin to notice how much of life is held together by assumptions, that chairs are chairs because we agree to call them that you are a self because you remember a past and imagine a future, that love, pain, hope, and fear all exist within a framework you did not build but still depend on. Ontological horror is not the fear that something will happen. It is the fear that something has always been happening and you never understood it, that the ground beneath your mind has always been less solid than you believed, that you are floating in a space where even the idea of space is questionable. This can lead to a kind of existential vertigo, a spinning sensation in the soul where you want to grab onto something real, but everything slips through your hands, not because it is fake, but because you no longer know what real means. You may still go to work. You may still laugh with friends. But inside, a part of you is always slightly detached, always slightly watching, always slightly wondering whether any of this is actually what it seems to be. Some people never experience this kind of terror. Others feel it only once or twice and quickly bury it. But there are some who cannot escape it, for whom the question of being becomes a daily struggle. They do not fear death. They fear reality itself, or the absence of it, or the unknowable shape of it. Is this knowledge dangerous? Perhaps. But it is also deeply human, because to question being is to take your awareness seriously. It is to admit that you do not have all the answers, and maybe never will. That your experience of life is only one slice of a much larger, darker, more mysterious whole. But in that darkness, there can also be peace. Because once you let go of the need to understand everything, you can begin to experience things more directly, without labels, without fear. You can listen to music without needing to explain why it moves you. You can watch the sunset without trying to capture it in words. You can be present in the mystery, not as a prisoner of confusion, but as a witness of wonder. Ontological horror may never fully leave. It may visit you from time to time, uninvited. It may sit quietly in the background of your thoughts, but it can also teach you something rare. That existence is not a problem to solve, but a presence to feel. That being here, even without understanding, is still something sacred. The curse of hyper-awareness. Imagine walking into a room and noticing everything at once. The flicker of a light that is slightly too bright, the ticking of a clock that no one else hears, the tension in a stranger's shoulders, the way someone's words do not match their tone, the smell of something faint but familiar, the weight of your own breath, the rhythm of your heartbeat, and above all, the thoughts running wild in your head, asking why you noticed it all in the first place. That is what it feels like to live with hyper-awareness. At first glance, it might sound like a gift. To be deeply in tune with your environment, to catch small details that others miss, to see beyond the surface. But over time, this awareness becomes a storm that never ends. A constant stream of signals, sensations, and meanings. It pulls you out of the moment and into a spiral of thought. It makes you question everything, not because you are curious, but because you cannot stop. Hyper-awareness is not just noticing. It is noticing that you are noticing. It is a loop of observation that folds in on itself. You are aware of your breath, then aware that you are aware. You begin to monitor how you speak, how you sit, how you blink. You watch yourself as if from a distance, and suddenly, even the simplest acts feel strange. You feel like a performer in your own life, watching, analyzing, correcting, but never simply being. Picture this man. He is having a conversation with a friend. He is smiling, nodding, listening. But inside, his mind is splitting. He is aware of how much eye contact he is making, aware of his posture, aware of how his voice sounds, aware of the way his friend reacts, aware of the fact that he is too aware. And beneath all of that, he is wondering if he is being real or just playing a role. That is not peace. That is the burden of thinking too much about being. There is a difference between self-awareness and hyper-awareness. Self-awareness helps you grow. It helps you reflect and understand. Hyper-awareness traps you. It keeps you in a feedback loop where every thought triggers another. You become so focused on how you are living that you forget to live. You replay moments in your mind, analyzing every word you said, every look you gave. You lie awake at night wondering what you could have done differently. You are haunted not by what happened, but by your inability to stop thinking about it. Even simple pleasures lose their meaning. You eat a meal, but you are thinking about how fast you are chewing. You walk outside, but you are observing how your feet hit the ground. You feel happy, but you are suspicious of the feeling. You ask yourself, is this real or just another distraction? The present moment slips away because you are too busy watching it, and people around you do not always understand. They say you are overthinking, that you should relax, but relaxation does not come when your mind is turned inward like a mirror pointed at itself. It reflects and reflects until the reflection becomes distorted. You are no longer reacting to life. You are reacting to your reaction. This awareness also extends to the world. You see things others do not. You feel the pain behind a smile. You hear the fear in someone's joke. You notice when someone's voice trembles just slightly. You feel when the mood in a room shifts by the smallest degree, and it becomes hard to separate your feelings from the feelings of others. You absorb their energy, their sadness, their anxiety. You carry emotions that are not yours. And sometimes you do not even know where they came from. The mind that is always watching becomes tired. You begin to long for silence, for simplicity, for the ability to act without second-guessing, to speak without replaying the sentence in your head 10 times. You wish you could turn off the part of you that sees too much. You envy those who move through life with ease, who do not dissect every choice, who do not question the meaning of every glance. And yet, this curse is not without depth. Hyper-awareness often comes from a history of needing to be alert, of surviving in spaces where you had to read the room to stay safe, of learning to anticipate danger, to soothe conflict, to control your environment by understanding it before it could hurt you. The gift became the defense, and the defense became the habit. So what can you do when you live in this state? You cannot force the awareness away, but you can soften its grip. You can learn to let the thoughts come without chasing them. You can practice noticing without reacting. You can remind yourself that not every moment needs to be understood. Some moments are meant to be lived, not examined. Breathing helps. Not just shallow breathing, but deep and slow. The kind that grounds you in the body instead of the mind. Movement helps too. Walking, stretching, anything that brings you back to sensation. Writing can help. Pouring out the loops of thought so they stop spinning inside. Speaking with someone who understands. Not someone who tells you to stop thinking, but someone who holds space for your awareness without judgment. And slowly, with time, you can begin to find balance. You can learn to direct your awareness outward instead of inward, to look at the sky, to listen to the world, to feel the wind on your skin without naming it. You can teach your mind that it does not have to protect you all the time, that you are safe even when you are not in control. That awareness is not the same as danger, because at its core, hyper-awareness is a form of fear. Fear of missing something, fear of doing it wrong, fear of not being enough. But you are enough, even when you are not analyzing, even when you are not prepared, even when you are simply existing. You do not have to be perfect to be present. The curse of hyper-awareness is real, but it is not permanent. With care, with patience, with trust in the moments you cannot explain, it can become something softer, something quieter. It can become a reminder that you are alive, that you are sensitive, that you care deeply. And in a world that often moves too fast and feels too shallow, that is not weakness. That is a kind of quiet strength. You will not always get it right. You will still have nights when the thoughts will not let you rest. But with time, you will learn how to return, how to live, how to be aware without being consumed. And that is how the curse begins to lift, not by forgetting, but by letting go, by learning that not everything must be seen to be felt. Not everything must be understood to be lived. The tragedy of identity. Picture this man walking through a quiet street, his hands in his pockets, his eyes lowered just enough to avoid meeting anyone else's. He knows where he is going. He knows who he is supposed to be. And yet, as he walks, there is a subtle discomfort in his chest. A question he does not want to answer begins to press gently from inside. Who am I really? And more importantly, who did I become because the world expected me to? From a very early age, we are given names. We are given roles. We are handed identities like clothes we never chose to wear. You are a son, a daughter, a student, a believer, a citizen. These labels come before we even understand what they mean, and slowly, as we grow, we learn to live inside them. Not because they always fit, but because they are all we know. That is how identity begins. Not as a choice, but as an inheritance. You are told how to behave, what to value, who to love, what success looks like. And you begin to perform. You say the right things. You develop the right habits. You align yourself with the expectations of others. And in doing so, you create a self, a version of you that works, that fits, that feels safe. But sometimes, late at night, or in moments of deep silence, that safe self starts to feel like a mask. You wonder if the real you is still hiding somewhere underneath, if the person you have become is a reflection of your truth, or just a survival strategy. And this is where the tragedy begins. Because identity is both your anchor and your cage, we are taught to think of identity as empowering, as the core of who we are. But in reality, identity can become a kind of prison. When your sense of self becomes too fixed, you stop growing. You defend your identity instead of exploring your being. You protect the image you have built instead of questioning what it covers. You become attached to your story, even if that story is painful. This attachment to identity becomes especially painful when life begins to change, when your job disappears, when a relationship ends, when your beliefs evolve, when your body no longer feels the same. Suddenly, the identity you built no longer matches your reality. And yet, you continue to hold on to it, because letting go feels like death, like a kind of fading, like you no longer know who you are. And sometimes, people cling to identities that hurt them, because even pain can feel more secure than uncertainty. A person who believes they are unlovable may continue acting in ways that keep them isolated, not because they want to be alone, but because they have built their identity around that loneliness. It becomes familiar. It becomes theirs. This is the tragic irony of identity. We think it defines us, but often it limits us. It keeps us stuck in versions of ourselves that no longer serve us. It makes us afraid to change, afraid to admit we were wrong, afraid to explore who we might become. The philosopher David Hume once suggested that the self is not a solid thing, but a collection of perceptions, thoughts, memories, feelings. He believed that what we call identity is really just a flow, a process, not a thing we are, but something we do. And if this is true, then our sense of being a single, stable person is an illusion. A necessary illusion, perhaps, but still an illusion. This can be terrifying, because it means that there is no one fixed you. There is no solid ground under your personality, just moments passing through you, just decisions being made, just roles being played. And yet, in those passing moments, we still search for meaning. We still want to be seen. We still want to belong. But how can you belong when you do not even know what you are belonging to? How can you be authentic when your sense of self keeps shifting? These questions do not have easy answers, because identity is not just personal, it is social. It is shaped by how others see you, by how they respond to you, by the mirror they hold up when they speak your name. This creates a double bind. You want to be true to yourself, but you also want to be accepted. And sometimes these two desires conflict. You learn to suppress parts of yourself to maintain peace. You learn to pretend in order to survive. And over time, the pretending becomes real. You forget who you were before the world started telling you who to be. This forgetting is the quiet heartbreak of growing up, the slow fading of your spontaneous self. The parts of you that once felt wild and full of wonder now feel childish, immature, irresponsible, and so you trade them in for a more respectable version of yourself, one that fits the frame, one that follows the rules, one that gets approval, and slowly the tragedy unfolds. You become successful, you become respected, you become everything you were supposed to be, but inside, a part of you begins to ache, a part that remembers, a part that wonders what it would have been like if you had been free. So what do we do with this tragedy? If identity is both our compass and our cage, how do we move forward? Maybe the answer is not to destroy identity, but to hold it lightly. To remember that you are more than any label, more than any role, more than any belief you once clung to. Maybe the answer is to remain curious about yourself, to ask, not who am I, but who am I becoming? To let your identity be fluid, alive, evolving, not something you protect, but something you explore. Because at the center of every person, there is a quiet space, a place untouched by stories and expectations, a place where you are simply aware, simply present. That place may not have a name. It may not offer a clear answer, but it feels honest. It feels real. And from that place, you can begin again. You can let go of the identities that no longer serve you. You can step into new ones without fear. You can remember that being human is not about being consistent. It is about being alive. And life, by its nature, is always changing. The Prison of Qualia. Imagine waking up in a world where everyone sees colors differently than you do, but no one can tell. You point at the sky and say it is blue. Someone else agrees. But in their mind, the color they see is completely different from yours. Yet because they learned to call it the same word, the illusion of agreement remains. You both say blue, but you are seeing two completely separate things. This is not a trick. This is the quiet problem of qualia. And you have been living inside it your whole life. Qualia are the raw, personal experiences that no one else can access. The feeling of pain, the taste of chocolate, the sound of your mother's voice. These are not just data. They are not just reactions. They are felt, deeply, privately, and no matter how closely you try to explain them, no one else can step inside your mind and feel them the way you do. You can say this light is bright, or this song feels nostalgic, but no amount of words can transfer that feeling. It lives inside you, and only you. Now think about this. If no one else can truly feel what you feel, then how much of your life is actually shared? You laugh at a joke, and someone laughs with you. But are they laughing for the same reason? You hear a song, and it brings tears to your eyes. But does it stir the same feeling in them? We build connections with others through words and gestures, but under that surface is a world of private sensations that no one else can reach. This is the Prison of Qualia, a quiet, invisible cell made of sensation. You are not alone in the world, but you are always alone inside your experience. You can touch someone, hold them, even love them deeply, but you can never directly feel what they feel, and they can never feel what you do. Every joy, every sorrow, every memory is filtered through the lens of your unique inner world. And no one else can step through that filter. You may try to describe your pain, but others will only understand it in the way their own pain has shaped them. You may say you feel empty, but how do you translate that sensation? Is it heaviness? Is it numbness? Is it pressure in your chest? The words you use are only signposts. The true feeling remains locked inside. You may show someone a painting and say it is beautiful, but they may not feel the same way, not because they are wrong, but because beauty itself is a qualia. It is not in the object, it is in the experience of the object. And this creates a strange kind of loneliness. Not the loneliness of being without people, but the loneliness of never being fully known. You can share your story, but not the exact texture of your experience. You can cry with someone, but your tears carry memories they cannot touch. You can sit beside someone in silence, but your silence may feel heavy while theirs feels peaceful. We live together, but we sense alone. Even science cannot reach into this space. It can measure brain waves. It can scan neural activity. It can identify the chemicals that move when you feel fear or joy, but it cannot feel what it is like to be you. No machine, no theory, no map can capture the redness of red as you see it, or the sting of betrayal as you feel it. The map is not the territory. The scan is not the experience. And so, we are trapped, not in a cruel way, but in a natural one. Our minds create the world for us, and we live inside those creations. Each of us is a universe, and though we touch, though we speak, though we build lives together, the core of who we are remains separate, not by choice, but by design. But this prison is not only painful, it is also what makes your experience so personal. The reason your memories are sacred, the reason your thoughts carry weight, because no one else can replicate them, no one else can own them. You are the only one who knows what it feels like to be you. That is both a burden and a gift. Now picture this. A woman stands in front of a mirror. She smiles, but her eyes are empty. Inside, her mind is a storm of thoughts. She remembers a moment from years ago, a smell, a sound, a voice that once comforted her. She feels it all return at once. Her heart aches. Her chest tightens. But to someone watching her, she is just standing still. This is the disconnect. The world sees the surface, but the surface is not the soul. We try to bridge this gap with art, with poetry, with music. We try to say, this is how it feels. Please, understand. And sometimes, someone hears your song and feels seen. That is the moment when the prison softens. When two minds, though separate, come close enough to feel like they are sharing something real. Not the exact same qualia, but a mirror of it, a resonance. And in that moment, the isolation fades. But it always returns, because life keeps reminding you that no one else lives in your mind, that your grief is yours, that your wonder is yours, that no one else can see the exact shade of sorrow you carry, or the exact light you see when you fall in love. And that is the strange truth of consciousness. It connects and it divides. It creates bridges, but also walls. So what do we do with this? We accept it. Not with despair, but with reverence. We honor the mystery of each person's inner world. We listen without assuming we fully understand. We love without pretending to fully know. And we speak, not to escape the prison, but to paint the walls with meaning. Because even if we are locked in our own experiences, we can still reach out. We can still touch hands through the bars. We can still say, I may not feel it exactly like you do, but I want to. I want to try. And maybe that is what makes life beautiful. Not that we can fully share our qualia, but that we try anyway. The prison of qualia is real, but it is not without windows. And through those windows, we see glimpses of each other, imperfect, incomplete, but enough to remind us that even in our deepest solitude, we are still part of something shared, something fragile, something human. Anti-Theodicy. Imagine a child in pain, lying in a hospital bed. The machines beep gently. The air smells like medicine. And the child, too young to understand, reaches out for comfort. A parent holds their hand. A doctor whispers reassuring words. But in the quiet of that room, the question begins to grow. Why would this happen? Not just why in the medical sense, but why in the deeper sense. Why would a universe allow this? Why would a God permit such pain? And worse, what if there is no answer that can make this right? Theodicy is the attempt to defend the goodness of God in the face of evil and suffering. It tries to explain how a loving and all-powerful Creator could allow pain, injustice, and horror. Philosophers and theologians have offered many answers: that suffering builds character, that evil exists to give humans free will, that the world is part of a larger plan we cannot see. These explanations are designed to hold the weight of grief without letting faith collapse. But Anti-Theodicy rejects all of that. Anti-Theodicy says that no reason can justify the suffering of the innocent. It says that to try to explain pain is to disrespect it, that to justify evil in the name of a divine plan is to side with the abuser instead of the victim. It does not mean giving up on the idea of God entirely, but it does mean giving up on the idea that suffering makes sense. And that is a deeply disturbing shift, because human beings crave meaning. When something tragic happens, we rush to understand. We say it was meant to be. We say it is part of God's will. We say everything happens for a reason. These words bring comfort. They create order. But Anti-Theodicy suggests that this comfort comes at a cost, that when we try to explain away suffering, we are really trying to protect ourselves from facing how truly senseless it is. Think of the Holocaust. Millions of lives lost in terror and cruelty. Think of genocide, famine, child abuse, war. These are not small accidents. They are massive, ongoing wounds in the fabric of human history. And to say that such events have a divine purpose can begin to sound like complicity, like trying to make the unbearable seem bearable, like telling the wounded that their pain serves some higher good, even when that good is nowhere to be seen. Anti-Theodicy refuses to offer that kind of comfort. It stands silently in the presence of suffering and says, this should not have happened, not for any reason, not for any plan. It acknowledges the horror without trying to clean it up. It lets grief speak without interruption. This can feel cold at first, harsh, even hopeless. But in another way, it is deeply compassionate, because it centers the experience of the one who suffers. It does not ask them to see their pain as a tool or a test. It does not require them to imagine a divine mind where everything adds up. It simply allows them to hurt without needing to make it meaningful. The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas believed that ethics begins not in explanation, but in responsibility. When you see the face of another person in pain, you are called to respond. Not with theories, but with care. Not with answers, but with presence. Anti-Theodicy follows this idea. It says that our task is not to explain why bad things happen. Our task is to be there when they do. This shift is not easy, especially for those raised in religious traditions that tie suffering to salvation. It feels natural to believe that hardship has a higher purpose, that pain is a path to enlightenment or reward. And sometimes people do grow through suffering. Sometimes it does deepen wisdom. But the mistake is to believe that growth justifies the pain. Because for every person who finds meaning in their suffering, there are many more who are broken by it. Anti-Theodicy does not try to remove hope. It simply places that hope in human hands. If there is redemption, it does not come from a hidden plan. It comes from how we respond, from how we care for one another, from how we refuse to turn away when the world becomes too hard to bear. It also asks us to reconsider our image of God. If we believe in a divine presence, must that presence be in control of everything? Must it allow tragedy to shape its story? Or could divinity be something else? Something that we meet not in the explanation of pain, but in the response to it, in the compassion that rises from one human to another, in the refusal to abandon the wounded. There is a quiet dignity in this view. It does not pretend, it does not promise, it simply shows up. It says, I do not know why this happened. I do not believe it should have happened, but I am here, and I will not leave you alone. That kind of presence is sacred. That kind of honesty is rare. And perhaps that is what makes Anti-Theodicy so powerful. It clears away the comforting illusions and invites us to be real. Real in our grief, real in our anger, real in our refusal to treat suffering as a lesson plan. Some people fear that without theodicy, we lose all meaning. But maybe we gain something else, a deeper kind of love. One that does not need everything to make sense. One that shows up even when there are no words. One that does not look away. Anti-Theodicy does not deny faith. It reshapes it. It turns it from belief in a plan to belief in presence. From trust in outcomes to trust in connection. From explaining pain to walking with those who carry it. And maybe that is enough. Maybe it is more than enough. Reality is simulation trap. Picture this. You are sitting in your room, alone. The fan hums above you. Your fingers move. Your thoughts flow. Everything seems real. The walls, the memories, the body you sit inside. But then a strange question enters your mind. What if none of this is real? What if everything you see, touch, and think is part of a program? What if you are not living in the world, but inside a simulation so perfect that you can never prove it wrong? It starts as a quiet curiosity, a playful thought, but then it grows. It grows because you cannot find a way to answer it. Every test you try only uses the same reality you are questioning. Every piece of logic you use to escape the trap is still part of the trap. And soon you find yourself inside a loop of doubt, a loop of looking at the world and wondering if it is just pixels and code. The simulation theory suggests that everything you know might be artificial, that your consciousness might be inside a machine, that this entire universe is a construction, a sandbox, a digital stage. But this idea is not just about computers or science. It is about the deepest kind of philosophical fear, the fear that your life is not your own, that your choices are not real, that everything you feel is just data running through a system you cannot touch. Now imagine you are walking through a forest. The trees sway. The wind touches your skin. You hear birds in the distance. You bend down and pick up a leaf. It crumbles in your fingers. You think, this feels real. This must be real. But then the thought comes again. What if the system is just that good? What if reality is rendered only when I look at it? What if this leaf is no different from a graphic in a video game, created only when needed? And that is when the trap tightens, because the more you think about it, the more unstable the world feels. The sky becomes suspicious. The words people say begin to sound scripted. Your memories feel like files you cannot fully open. You start to wonder, have I been here before? Is this a loop? Is someone watching me? Am I being tested? The simulation trap is not just a theory. It is a mental shift. It takes the ground beneath your feet and turns it into a question. It makes you feel like a character in a play without a script, like someone who has woken up inside a story they did not write. And the worst part is not the idea that it might be true. The worst part is that you can never know. You begin to feel a distance from your life, a kind of disconnection. You still eat, you still speak, you still smile when someone makes a joke. But part of you is watching from the outside. Part of you is saying, this might not be real. And that part never stops whispering. It whispers when you lie awake at night. It whispers when you feel joy and wonder if the feeling is programmed. It whispers when you cry and wonder if the sadness is just another line of code. Some try to fight it with logic. They say, if it is a simulation, then it does not matter. You still feel what you feel. You still love. You still suffer. You still choose. But for those caught in the trap, that is not enough. Because the fear is not just about what is real. It is about what is not yours. It is about the possibility that everything you are is a product, not a soul, but a signal, not a mind, but a model. Others try to escape it by ignoring the thought, by distracting themselves, by burying the question under layers of routine. But it always finds a way back, in the quiet moments. In the silence between conversations, in the spaces where the mind begins to ask, who am I if none of this is real? And yet, even within the trap, there is something to be found. Something that does not depend on the answer. Something that whispers a different kind of truth. That whether the world is real or not, your experience still matters. That the pain you feel is not less because it might be part of a program. That the love you offer still touches something. That the beauty you see still stirs your heart, even if the stars are only lights on a screen. Because maybe the question is not whether the world is real. Maybe the question is whether you are present. Whether you are awake inside the illusion. Whether you are living fully, even if the stage is artificial. Because in a way we are all inside simulations. Our memories are not accurate. Our thoughts are shaped by language. Our senses only show us a sliver of what is out there, and yet we feel. We hope. We reach. So maybe the simulation is not the prison. Maybe the trap is thinking that it steals your meaning, that it takes away your freedom, because meaning does not come from what the world is. It comes from how you live inside it, whether you choose kindness, whether you face the silence, whether you give your heart to things that cannot be proven. You may never know if this reality is real. You may never find the edge of the simulation, but you can still feel the wind. You can still look into someone's eyes and see something that cannot be faked. You can still sit with the fear and realize that the fear itself is proof that you are here. You are experiencing. You are asking. And maybe that is the way out of the trap, not by finding the answer, but by realizing that the question itself is what makes you human. That doubt is not weakness. It is awareness. It is the part of you that refuses to be numb, that refuses to take the world for granted. So next time the thought comes that maybe this is all a simulation, do not run. Do not fight it. Sit with it. Feel the strangeness. Let it open you. Let it remind you that reality is not something you hold. It is something you live. And whether this is the original world or just one of many layers, your experience still matters. Your choices still echo. Your presence still shines. Because even in a simulation, you are still you. You are still wondering, still feeling, still alive. And maybe, just maybe, that is real enough. The infinite indifference of nature. Picture this. A storm is tearing through a coastal village. Winds rip through the trees. Waves crush everything in their path. Homes collapse. Lives are lost. Then, just as quickly as it arrived, the storm passes. The sky clears. The ocean returns to calm. Birds begin to fly again. But the people are left in pieces. They bury their dead. They try to rebuild, and above them the stars continue to shine, as if nothing happened, as if their pain meant nothing at all. This is the quiet terror buried inside existence. That nature does not care. The earth turns whether you are crying or laughing. The sun rises for the kind and the cruel alike. Trees grow, rivers flow, seasons change, all without noticing you. You can suffer in the deepest ways, and the universe will not stop. It will not pause to ask why. This is the infinite indifference of nature. We like to believe we matter, that the world responds to our presence, that it sees our pain, that it rewards our kindness. But the more we look into the structure of reality, the more we begin to sense that we are not being seen. Not in the way we hope. The universe does not blink when someone dies. The stars do not dim when a heart breaks. The ocean does not soften for those who have lost everything. Nature continues, always. Blind to sorrow, deaf to prayers, calmly unmoved. This realization does not always come quickly. As children, we often think of the world as a place that loves us, a place where fairness exists, where good things happen to good people. But life slowly teaches something else. Earthquakes do not check who lives in the house. Diseases do not care about innocence. Floods do not skip over the weak. The forces of nature move according to their own laws, untouched by morality or emotion. This is not to say that nature is evil. It is not cruel in the way a person can be cruel. It simply does not register our suffering. It does not take sides. It does not make exceptions. And in that neutrality, there is a kind of horror, because when something hurts you without reason, you want to believe there is a reason. You want to find meaning in the loss, but with nature, there is often none. Just a system that functions, and your life caught in its path. The philosopher Blaise Pascal once wrote that man is a reed, the weakest in nature, but a thinking reed. We are fragile, yet aware. And that awareness becomes the source of our dread. Because we see our smallness, we see the universe stretching far beyond what we can touch. We see that we are surrounded by forces we cannot control, and we know that when we die, the world will go on exactly as it did before. Some try to comfort themselves by imagining that nature holds secrets we do not understand, that there is a hidden balance, a deeper harmony, and sometimes nature does reveal beauty, a forest growing back after a fire, a flower breaking through concrete. These images touch us because they reflect our desire to believe that life renews itself with purpose. But even beauty, in the hands of nature, is not intentional. It simply happens, without design. Without a guiding will, in the face of this indifference, many people turn to religion, to the belief in a higher mind that watches and cares, a presence that gives weight to suffering and meaning to chaos. And for some, this faith is a source of strength. But even faith must wrestle with the reality of nature's silence. The storms keep coming. The ground keeps shaking. The ice melts or grows with no regard for human life. Others turn to science to understand the patterns, to prepare, to protect. And science gives us tools, but it does not give us comfort. It explains how the storm works, but not why it came to your town and not another. It explains the cell, the atom, the orbit, but it does not explain why you had to say goodbye to someone you loved far too soon. This is where the indifference of nature becomes personal. When you stand at a funeral, when you sit by a hospital bed, when you look at the news and see a child under rubble, a parent screaming, a community destroyed, you want to believe that someone or something is watching, that it all matters, that it will be balanced, but the sky remains silent. The trees do not bow. The earth does not apologize. So what do we do with this? How do we live in a world that does not care about our pain? Maybe the answer is not to demand that nature care, but to care anyway. Maybe it is not about being seen by the universe, but about choosing to see each other. In the face of indifference, kindness becomes resistance. Compassion becomes power. If the world does not care, then your care becomes even more important. Because if nothing is owed to us, then everything good is a gift we give. A hug, a warm meal, a hand reaching out when someone falls. These are not answers, but they are responses, and they matter, not because nature notices, but because we do. Some might say that this makes life even more beautiful, that in a universe without meaning, the meaning we create is real, not handed down, not enforced, but chosen. That every act of love becomes a quiet rebellion against the coldness around us. That every time we notice each other, every time we say I see you, I care, we are changing the shape of the space we live in. The infinite indifference of nature is not something we can defeat, but it is something we can face with honesty, with courage, with a willingness to live in a world that may never explain itself, and still choose to make that world more bearable for others. You were born into a system that does not notice you, but you can notice. You can care, and that is enough. Fatalism of the flesh. Picture this man. He wakes up each morning and stares at the ceiling in silence. He feels the weight of his body before he feels the weight of his thoughts. His knees ache. His hands are slower. His breath is slightly heavier than it was years ago. He rises not because he wants to, but because the day demands it. As he moves, he remembers something unspoken, a truth that lives in the bones, that no matter how hard the mind tries to rise above, the body will always pull it back down. We often live as if we are ideas walking in skin, as if the body is simply a tool, something we command, something that serves us. But slowly, the illusion begins to break. The body is not just a carrier, it is a force, a law, a boundary that cannot be escaped. And one day, you begin to realize that your body is not just something you use, it is something that decides. The mind dreams of freedom, it imagines flights, it sets goals, it creates meaning. But the flesh obeys a different logic. The body is a system of rules. It needs food, it needs sleep, it bleeds, it scars. Only the awareness that something new has arrived. Of course, this takes practice. The illusion of self is strong. It returns quickly. We get caught in our names, our roles, our memories. We defend ourselves in arguments. We seek praise. We fear rejection. These are all signs that the mind is clinging to a story of self. But if we pause, if we breathe, if we look directly, we can see that all of it is passing. Thoughts pass, feelings pass, even the sense of I passes, and what remains is not nothing. It is presence, awareness, the quiet space where everything comes and goes. Some people discover this during meditation, others during grief, or joy, or illness, or moments of great stillness. It is not something you can force. It arrives when you stop searching, when you stop needing to be someone and simply allow yourself to be. And in that space there is peace, because you no longer have to hold yourself together. You no longer have to prove anything. You no longer have to defend a name, a past, a future. You can rest, not as a person, but as the awareness that holds it all. This is not about denying your life. You still have a body. You still have responsibilities. You still love and care. But underneath all of that, you know the truth, that the self you thought you were is not fixed, not solid, not real in the way you once believed. It is a story, a useful story, but a story all the same. And knowing this, you can live more gently, more freely. You can let others be who they are without needing them to reflect you. You can forgive more easily. You can listen more deeply, because you are no longer locked inside a small self. You are open, spacious, aware. Consciousness without a self is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a new kind of seeing, one that does not grasp or fear or fight, one that simply watches, and in that watching finds something more true than any name could hold, the illusion of progress. Imagine climbing a staircase that never ends. Step after step, you rise, expecting to reach something greater, a door, a view, a final floor where you can stop and breathe. But there is no top, just more stairs, and each time you glance behind you, the floor below disappears. You can never rest, you can never arrive, you can only climb. That is the quiet feeling behind the illusion of progress. We live in a world that teaches us to move forward, to improve, to grow, to fix. From a young age, we are told to chase better versions of ourselves, a better body, a better career, a better relationship. We measure life in milestones, in promotions, in goals achieved. We believe that if we keep going, one day we will feel complete. But that day never comes. The feeling of arrival is always delayed, always somewhere beyond the next hill. Progress feels like movement. It feels like momentum. But if you pause and look around, you might notice something unsettling. That for all the effort you have made, the place you are in does not feel that different. You are still wondering, still worrying, still wanting more. You reach goals, but the joy fades. You fix problems, but new ones appear. You grow wiser, but still feel lost. And slowly, you begin to ask, am I actually moving forward, or am I walking in a circle that only looks like a line? The illusion of progress is powerful because it is comforting. It gives you something to aim for. It gives you the sense that today is a stepping stone and tomorrow will be brighter. But that hope can become a trap. Because if your peace always depends on the next thing, then you never truly rest in the now. You live in delay, in postponement, in the silent belief that this moment is not enough. Think about a man who works every day to build his future. He earns, he saves, he plans. He tells himself he will enjoy life when things are stable, when the house is paid off, when the job is secure, when his body feels better, when everything falls into place. But those conditions keep changing. Every time he gets closer, the finish line moves. He lives in pursuit, but not in presence. And one day he looks around and wonders where the time went. He wonders why he still feels tired, still feels incomplete, despite all he has done. This is not a failure. It is a pattern, a loop that many fall into, because we have been taught that more is the answer. More success, more knowledge, more healing, more achievement. But sometimes more is not progress. Sometimes more is escape. Sometimes it is distraction dressed as growth. You might look back on your life and think of all the ways you have changed. You have learned. You have adapted. But has the core feeling really shifted? Do you feel more whole now, or just more aware of what you lack? Do you feel closer to peace, or just more skilled at chasing it? The world rewards visible progress. Certificates, titles, followers, transformation stories. But there is a kind of progress that does not show, the kind that is quiet, the kind that happens when you stop running, when you stop fixing, when you allow yourself to be as you are, without the need to become something else. Real growth often feels like stillness, like sinking into the present moment and realizing that you do not need to go anywhere, that the urge to improve can come from fear, not truth, that the desire to always be better can sometimes hide a deep discomfort with simply being. This does not mean we stop learning. It does not mean we never set goals. It means we become aware of the story we are telling ourselves, the story that says life is a ladder and we are not yet high enough, the story that says worth is something you earn through effort. That joy must be deserved. Imagine a woman sitting by a river. She has spent her whole life trying to reach a better place. But for a moment she stops. She watches the water move. She feels the wind. She lets go of the idea that this moment is just a pause between achievements. She lets it be the destination itself. And in that moment, something shifts. She is not progressing. She is not improving. She is simply alive. And it is enough. The illusion of progress can keep you from seeing what is already here. It can keep you waiting for the perfect version of yourself. But perfection is a moving target. And the self is not a product. You are not a project to be completed. You are a process to be experienced. When you begin to see this, your relationship with life changes. You stop asking, "Am I getting better?" And you start asking, "Am I being honest? Am I being kind? Am I being present?" These questions do not lead to visible trophies, but they lead to peace, to depth, to moments that do not need to be improved because they are already whole. And sometimes you will still feel the pull of progress. You will still want to achieve, to grow, to do more. That is human. But now you can ask where that pull is coming from. Is it coming from love or from lack? Is it born from curiosity or from the fear of being not enough? And in asking, you begin to wake up. Because the real trap is not in wanting to change. It is in believing that change will finally make you worthy. You have always been worthy, even in your confusion, even in your stillness, even when nothing seems to be moving forward. So take a breath, look around, Let this moment stand without needing to be a step towards something else. Let it be its own destination. Let yourself rest in the truth that you are not falling behind. You are not late. You are not broken. You are simply here. And here is not a mistake. It is not a failure. It is the place where life actually happens. The place you have been trying to reach without knowing it. The illusion of progress will whisper that you must keep climbing. But sometimes the deepest wisdom is found in sitting down, in placing your hand on your heart and saying, I do not need to be more to be loved. I do not need to move to matter. Because some of the most beautiful things do not grow upward. They grow inward, and they are invisible, and they are already enough. Metaphysical entrapment. Picture this. You are dreaming, and in the dream, you are fully aware. You walk through a world that feels real. You feel wind on your face. You see the ground under your feet. You hear voices, laughter, music. Everything responds to your touch. But then something shifts. You begin to realize that none of this is real. The people are not people. The places are not places. And even your own body is part of the illusion. You try to wake up. You try to escape. But you cannot. The dream does not break. It keeps going. And you are still inside it, fully aware, but unable to leave. This is the sensation behind metaphysical entrapment. The disturbing idea that you are trapped not just in a place, not just in a body, but in reality itself. That the very structure of existence is a kind of enclosure you did not choose and cannot escape. It is not just physical. Only the awareness that something new has arrived. Of course, this takes practice. The illusion of self is strong. It returns quickly. We get caught in our names, our roles, our memories. We defend ourselves in arguments. We seek praise. We fear rejection. These are all signs that the mind is clinging to a story of self. But if we pause, if we breathe, if we look directly, we can see that all of it is passing. Thoughts pass, feelings pass, even the sense of I passes, and what remains is not nothing. It is presence, awareness, the quiet space where everything comes and goes. Some people discover this during meditation, others during grief, or joy, or illness, or moments of great stillness. It is not something you can force. It arrives when you stop searching, when you stop needing to be someone and simply allow yourself to be. And in that space there is peace, because you no longer have to hold yourself together. You no longer have to prove anything. You no longer have to defend a name, a past, a future. You can rest, not as a person, but as the awareness that holds it all. This is not about denying your life. You still have a body. You still have responsibilities. You still love and care. But underneath all of that, you know the truth, that the self you thought you were is not fixed, not solid, not real in the way you once believed. It is a story, a useful story, but a story all the same. And knowing this, you can live more gently, more freely. You can let others be who they are without needing them to reflect you. You can forgive more easily. You can listen more deeply, because you are no longer locked inside a small self. You are open, spacious, aware. Consciousness without a self is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a new kind of seeing, one that does not grasp or fear or fight, one that simply watches, and in that watching finds something more true than any name could hold, the illusion of progress. Imagine climbing a staircase that never ends. Step after step, you rise, expecting to reach something greater, a door, a view, a final floor where you can stop and breathe. But there is no top, just more stairs, and each time you glance behind you, the floor below disappears. You can never rest. You can never arrive. You can only climb. That is the quiet feeling behind the illusion of progress. We live in a world that teaches us to move forward, to improve, to grow, to fix. From a young age, we are told to chase better versions of ourselves, a better body, a better career, a better relationship. We measure life in milestones, in promotions, in goals achieved. We believe that if we keep going, one day we will feel complete. But that day never comes. The feeling of arrival is always delayed, always somewhere beyond the next hill. Progress feels like movement. It feels like momentum. But if you pause and look around, you might notice something unsettling. That for all the effort you have made, the place you are in does not feel that different. You are still wondering, still worrying, still wanting more. You reach goals, but the joy fades. You fix problems, but new ones appear. You grow wiser, but still feel lost. And slowly, you begin to ask, am I actually moving forward, or am I walking in a circle that only looks like a line? The illusion of progress is powerful because it is comforting. It gives you something to aim for. It gives you the sense that today is a stepping stone and tomorrow will be brighter. But that hope can become a trap. Because if your peace always depends on the next thing, then you never truly rest in the now. You live in delay, in postponement, in the silent belief that this moment is not enough. Think about a man who works every day to build his future. He earns, he saves, he plans. He tells himself he will enjoy life when things are stable, when the house is paid off, when the job is secure, when his body feels better, when everything falls into place. But those conditions keep changing. Every time he gets closer, the finish line moves. He lives in pursuit, but not in presence. And one day he looks around and wonders where the time went. He wonders why he still feels tired, still feels incomplete, despite all he has done. This is not a failure. It is a pattern, a loop that many fall into, because we have been taught that more is the answer. More success, more knowledge, more healing, more achievement. But sometimes more is not progress. Sometimes more is escape. Sometimes it is distraction dressed as growth. You might look back on your life and think of all the ways you have changed. You have learned. You have adapted. But has the core feeling really shifted? Do you feel more whole now, or just more aware of what you lack? Do you feel closer to peace, or just more skilled at chasing it? The world rewards visible progress. Certificates, titles, followers, transformation stories. But there is a kind of progress that does not show, the kind that is quiet, the kind that happens when you stop running, when you stop fixing, when you allow yourself to be as you are, without the need to become something else. Real growth often feels like stillness, like sinking into the present moment and realizing that you do not need to go anywhere, that the urge to improve can come from fear, not truth, that the desire to always be better can sometimes hide a deep discomfort with simply being. This does not mean we stop learning. It does not mean we never set goals. It means we become aware of the story we are telling ourselves, the story that says life is a ladder and we are not yet high enough, the story that says worth is something you earn through effort. That joy must be deserved. Imagine a woman sitting by a river. She has spent her whole life trying to reach a better place. But for a moment she stops. She watches the water move. She feels the wind. She lets go of the idea that this moment is just a pause between achievements. She lets it be the destination itself. And in that moment, something shifts. She is not progressing. She is not improving. She is simply alive. And it is enough. The illusion of progress can keep you from seeing what is already here. It can keep you waiting for the perfect version of yourself. But perfection is a moving target. And the self is not a product. You are not a project to be completed. You are a process to be experienced. When you begin to see this, your relationship with life changes. You stop asking, am I getting better? And you start asking, am I being honest? Am I being kind? Am I being present? These questions do not lead to visible trophies, but they lead to peace, to depth, to moments that do not need to be improved because they are already whole. And sometimes you will still feel the pull of progress. You will still want to achieve, to grow, to do more. That is human. But now you can ask where that pull is coming from. Is it coming from love or from lack? Is it born from curiosity or from the fear of being not enough? And in asking, you begin to wake up. Because the real trap is not in wanting to change. It is in believing that change will finally make you worthy. You have always been worthy, even in your confusion, even in your stillness, even when nothing seems to be moving forward. So take a breath, look around, let this moment stand without needing to be a step towards something else. Let it be its own destination. Let yourself rest in the truth that you are not falling behind, you are not late, you are not broken, you are simply here, and here is not a mistake, it is not a failure. It is the place where life actually happens, the place you have been trying to reach without knowing it. The illusion of progress will whisper that you must keep climbing. But sometimes the deepest wisdom is found in sitting down, in placing your hand on your heart and saying, I do not need to be more to be loved. I do not need to move to matter. Because some of the most beautiful things do not grow upward. They grow inward, and they are invisible, and they are already enough. Metaphysical entrapment. Picture this. You are dreaming, and in the dream, you are fully aware. You walk through a world that feels real. You feel wind on your face. You see the ground under your feet. You hear voices, laughter, music. Everything responds to your touch. But then something shifts. You begin to realize that none of this is real. The people are not people. The places are not places. And even your own body is part of the illusion. You try to wake up. You try to escape. But you cannot. The dream does not break. It keeps going. And you are still inside it, fully aware, but unable to leave. This is the sensation behind metaphysical entrapment. The disturbing idea that you are trapped not just in a place, not just in a body, but in reality itself. That the very structure of existence is a kind of enclosure you did not choose and cannot escape. It is not just physical. It is not about cages or walls. It is deeper. It is the unsettling suspicion that the rules of reality, the boundaries of thought, and even the sense of self are all parts of a system you can never step outside of. Most people never think about this. We live our lives moving from task to task, thought to thought, moment to moment. But occasionally, a strange awareness flickers through, a moment where you realize you are always inside something, inside a body, inside a mind, inside a world, and you have never seen what is outside of any of it. That moment is the beginning of metaphysical questioning. And for some, it becomes the beginning of a slow and silent terror, because you start to ask questions you cannot answer. What is this place? Why does anything exist at all? Is there a way out? And even more disturbing, is there something watching, something designing, or is this all just happening without intention? These are not the questions of science. They are deeper than that. These are questions that stretch the limits of thought itself. Philosophers have wrestled with this problem for centuries. The idea that existence might be a trap, a loop, a dream, a simulation. That everything we know is filtered through consciousness, and consciousness itself may be limited by forces we cannot understand. You cannot think outside of thought. You cannot perceive beyond perception. You are inside, always inside. And no matter how far you go, you are still going within the system, not outside of it. This is what makes the feeling of entrapment so unique. It is not about being held by someone or something. It is about being held by existence itself. Every time you try to break free, you realize that your tools for escape are also part of the trap. Thought, language, logic, emotion. They are not keys. They are parts of the structure. You cannot outthink the mind with the mind. You cannot see past reality using reality. Some describe this feeling as waking up inside a locked room with no doors. You can move around. You can decorate the space. You can even make it beautiful. but you know it is still a room. You know you did not choose to be there, and you know you cannot leave. That quiet realization begins to haunt the edges of your awareness. In spiritual traditions, this idea takes many forms. Some believe life is a test, others see it as a cycle, a trap of birth and rebirth that continues until enlightenment. The idea of samsara in Eastern philosophy is exactly this, an endless repetition driven by craving and illusion. And liberation only comes when you see the trap for what it is. But even in that, there is uncertainty. Because what if the very idea of liberation is also part of the illusion? What if the longing to escape is itself another form of attachment? In modern thought, metaphysical entrapment is explored through simulations and artificial intelligence. What if we are programs inside a vast machine? What if our memories are fabricated? What if our entire reality is being generated moment by moment based on a system we can never comprehend? This is not just science fiction. It is a serious question in philosophy and physics. And the deeper you go into it, the more the ground begins to feel unstable. This instability is the core of the experience. You begin to doubt not just what you see, but what it means to see. You begin to question not just who you are, but what it means to be anyone. You begin to sense that your freedom may be limited by structures you cannot perceive, that your sense of self, your sense of time, your understanding of cause and effect are all parts of a design that keeps you within certain bounds. But if we are trapped, then what is the point? Why continue? Why care? These questions are difficult, because metaphysical entrapment does not come with instructions. It does not offer hope. It does not offer meaning. It simply opens a door in your mind and shows you that beyond it is more of the same. More questions, more layers, more mystery. And yet, even in that mystery, there is something worth noticing. Because if you are trapped, then so is everyone else. And in that shared entrapment, there is a strange kind of intimacy, a shared condition, a collective experience. You are not alone in the loop. Everyone you love, everyone you fear, everyone you meet is also walking the same edge, wondering the same things, feeling the same invisible walls. Maybe the point is not to escape the trap, but to see it clearly, to live fully within it, to become so aware of its shape that you stop trying to flee and start trying to understand, not as a way to win, but as a way to witness. You are here. You do not know why. You cannot get out, but you can see, you can feel, you can reflect, and perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the trap becomes less frightening when you stop fighting it, when you stop needing a way out and begin to notice what is within. Metaphysical entrapment is not a problem to solve. It is a condition to recognize. And in that recognition, a different kind of freedom may appear. Not the freedom to leave, but the freedom to be fully present, fully human, fully awake inside the space you did not choose, but have the power to shape. The morality of extinction. Imagine a world where the last human breath has already been taken. The cities are empty. The oceans are quiet. The forests slowly reclaim the roads. There is no more war, no more hunger, no more laughter, no more pain. Nature breathes without interference. The earth spins silently, and no one is left to name the silence. Now ask yourself this: was that ending wrong? Or was it simply the closing of a chapter that had gone on too long? The idea of extinction is often met with fear, with denial, with moral urgency. We are taught that life must continue, that survival is always good, that existence is sacred. But we rarely ask the deeper question: is it right to continue at any cost? Is more life always better than no life? And is the end of a species always a tragedy? These questions become heavier when we place ourselves in them. Humans are not just another animal. We build, we destroy, we dream, we pollute. We create beauty, and we create ruin. We are capable of deep compassion and deep cruelty. So if we imagine a future without us, We are forced to measure not just our achievements, but our impact. Are we a blessing to the earth, or a burden that cannot stop growing? The morality of extinction begins with one quiet idea, that perhaps non-existence is not the worst outcome, that perhaps ending can be cleaner than continuing, that the absence of suffering might be kinder than the presence of progress. This is not a call to despair. It is an invitation to look clearly at what our continued existence demands, and what it costs. Picture a man who believes in growth. He works hard. He raises children. He contributes to society. But he also knows that his life adds weight. His needs take from the land. His comforts come at a price others must pay. He wonders, if every generation continues this pattern, how long before the damage is too much? How long before our presence becomes a wound the earth cannot heal? This is not an argument for self-hatred. It is not about punishing the human race. It is about facing the truth that our presence is not neutral. We do not live gently. We shape the world with our tools, with our hunger, with our fear. And while we tell ourselves stories of progress, we also know that many of our stories end in collapse. So then comes the question, if extinction could mean the end of suffering, does it hold a moral weight of its own? Is it ethical to preserve life, if that life only deepens harm? Or is it more ethical to let the story end when the cost becomes too high? Some people argue that life is always better than nothing, that even in pain there is meaning, that even in despair there is still beauty. But this depends on who is asked, and on what we value more. Is it more important that life continues, or that life is kind? Is it more important that we exist, or that we do no harm? Think of a species that is suffering. Every birth brings more pain. Every cycle repeats the same trauma, and there is no clear path to healing. Would it be wrong to let that species fade, to allow the silence to return, or would it be mercy? We are taught to fight for survival, but survival is not always peace. Sometimes it is violence. Sometimes it is exploitation, and sometimes it is the refusal to let go of something that has already ended in spirit, even if not in body. The morality of extinction also forces us to ask why we fear it so much. Is it because we love life? Or is it because we are terrified of non-being? Do we cling to existence because it is good, or because we cannot imagine the absence of ourselves? And if our motivation is fear, not love, then are we truly making moral choices? Or are we simply avoiding the quiet truth that all things end? Now imagine a world where humans decide to stop, not through violence, not through war, but through awareness, through the gentle choice to no longer expand, to no longer demand, to slowly step back and let the world recover, to accept that we had our time, that we touched the stars, that we told our stories, and that we chose to end them with grace rather than force. That image feels impossible because we are wired to survive, to resist ending, to reach for more. But maybe morality does not always live in reaching. Maybe it lives in knowing when to stop, when to rest, when to surrender. Extinction is not always sudden. It can be slow, a quiet fading. And in that fading there can be dignity, not because we failed, but because we saw the truth, that sometimes letting go is the most ethical choice, not just for us, but for all the life that continues after we are gone. But even then, the decision is not simple. Because within every human life is also love, joy, art, memory. We are not only destroyers, we are also creators. So how do we measure the balance? Is our beauty enough to justify our harm? Is our kindness enough to outweigh our cruelty? Is our hope enough to excuse our history? There is no final answer, only reflection. The morality of extinction does not give us clear rules. It gives us a mirror, and in that mirror we must look honestly, not with pride, not with shame, but with clarity. To ask, if we continue, what do we bring? And if we end, what do we leave behind? Not all endings are failures. Some are choices, and some choices require more courage than survival ever did. So we sit with the silence. We hold the weight of what it means to exist. And we ask, Not whether we can go on, but whether we should, whether we must, whether the world would thank us for staying or for stepping away. That is the quiet depth behind the morality of extinction. Not despair, not guilt, just the still question of whether presence is all better than absence, and whether love, true love, sometimes means letting go. The broken mirror of memory. Imagine looking into a mirror that has cracks running across its surface. You can still see your reflection, but it is fractured. Your face is split in strange ways. Some parts are distorted. Others are missing. As you move closer, you realize that no matter how hard you try, you cannot see yourself clearly. You cannot tell what is real and what is altered. This mirror, broken yet familiar, is what memory can feel like. A reflection that you trust but should not fully believe. A picture of the past that comforts you but also betrays you. Memory is often treated like a record, a way to hold on to the past, to make sense of who we are and where we have been. We rely on it to tell stories about ourselves, to remember pain and joy, to reconnect with those we have lost. But memory is not a fixed archive. It is not a storage room we walk into and retrieve things from. It is something far more fragile, more flexible, more dangerous. When we remember something, we are not replaying a video. We are reconstructing a feeling, a moment, a sequence of events, and each time we do it, we change it. A detail gets added. Another gets lost. A color becomes brighter. A word becomes sharper. The emotion becomes heavier or lighter depending on who we are when we remember it. Over time, these memories shape us. They become our identity. But what happens when the memory itself is not true? The disturbing truth is that memory is not only flawed, it is also active. It edits, it erases, it creates. It does not serve truth. It serves coherence. It wants your story to make sense. It wants your present self to feel consistent with your past. So it smooths the edges. It hides contradictions. And sometimes it invents entirely. Think of a childhood event you remember clearly. A birthday, a family trip, a moment of fear. Now imagine that one small piece of it is wrong. The song that played, the look someone gave you, the thing you said. Imagine that someone else who was there remembers it differently, not because they are lying, but because their mirror is broken in a different way. This is not just a difference in perspective. This is a difference in reality. The philosopher David Hume questioned whether we could even trust our sense of continuity. He asked how we know we are the same person over time if the only connection is memory. If that memory is false, then what does that say about the self? Who are you if your past is fiction? This leads to a haunting question. How much of your life story is real? Not just the events, but the meanings you attach to them, the lessons you believe you learned, the wounds you carry. What if the pain you feel is built on a version of the past that never truly happened? What if your love, your anger, your regret are all built on illusions shaped by a broken mirror? In psychology, studies have shown how easy it is to implant false memories. People have been convinced they were lost in a mall as children when they were not. They have described crimes they never committed. With enough suggestion, enough emotion, the brain begins to create what was never there. And once it is created, it feels just as real as anything else. This is not a sign of weakness. It is how memory works. It protects you. It adjusts your past to support your present. If you need to see yourself as a survivor, memory will highlight your struggle. If you need to see yourself as innocent, memory will dim the moments of guilt. If you need to justify a decision, memory will emphasize the pain that led you there. And yet, we trust it. We lean on memory to tell us who we are, to guide our choices, to explain our behavior. But when that memory is cracked, when it begins to distort, we are left wondering whether we ever knew ourselves at all. This is where the tragedy sets in. You look back to find clarity, but instead, you find fog. You want to heal from your past, but but you cannot be sure where the wound began. You try to forgive, but you do not fully remember what was said. You try to understand someone, but their version of the past is nothing like yours. You want to move on, but the mirror will not stay still. Some people become trapped in this uncertainty. They doubt themselves constantly. They replay events trying to get the details right. They question whether they are remembering or imagining. This can lead to a quiet kind of despair. Not loud, not dramatic, but deep. Because if memory is not reliable, then what can be trusted? What is real? Others respond by clinging harder. They refuse to believe their memory could be wrong. They fight over facts. They defend their version of the past as absolute. But this too is a form of fear, a way of holding the pieces of the mirror in place even as the cracks grow deeper. Is there any way out of this? Maybe not completely. The mirror will never be whole again. Maybe it never was. But there is a way to live with it, a way to stop needing the past to be perfect, to stop needing your memories to justify your pain or your pride, to see them not as facts, but as reflections, as impressions, as fragments of a dream that helped shape you, but do not define you. You can begin to accept that your memories are not sacred, that your story is not set in stone, that your identity is flexible. You can allow others to have their own mirrors, broken in different ways. You can soften your grip on what you thought was true, and in that softening, something else appears. A kind of peace, a kind of freedom. You stop trying to make the past make sense. You stop trying to defend a version of yourself that may never have existed. You start being here, now, without needing every reflection to match. The broken mirror of memory does not need to be fixed. It just needs to be seen for what it is. A beautiful, flawed, human attempt to hold on to time. And like all things human, it deserves compassion. The collapse of the absolute. Imagine being a child again. You ask a question, something simple. Why is the sky blue? Why do people die? Why does it hurt to be alone? And someone answers you with certainty. A parent, a teacher, a voice of authority. They tell you it is because of science, or because of God, or because that is just the way life works. And you believe them, because it feels good to believe. Certainty feels like safety. It feels like standing on solid ground in a world full of moving things. But something happens as you grow. You hear other answers. You meet people who believe different things. You see contradictions. You begin to notice that the truths you were given do not match the truths others carry. And slowly, the solid ground starts to crack. What once felt absolute begins to tremble. What once felt final begins to blur. And you begin to ask, what if there is no final truth? What if the things I built my life on were not foundations, but illusions? The collapse of the absolute is not loud. It is quiet. It does not come with fire or thunder. It comes with silence, with the stillness of sitting alone and realizing that the rules you thought were unbreakable are not real, that morality shifts, that meaning moves, that everything you thought was firm is, in fact, fluid. We are taught to crave absolutes. We want to know what is right, what is wrong, what is real, what is fake. We want clear lines, clear answers, clear laws of existence that do not bend. But the world does not offer such clarity. The more you look, the more everything becomes context, perspective, subjective interpretation shaped by time and place and feeling. You might believe in justice, but justice looks different across cultures. You might believe in truth, but truth shifts with language and history. You might believe in love, but even love changes its form and its meaning. So where does that leave you if the absolutes are gone? If there is no single path, no single voice, no single law that binds all things together, it leaves you in a strange space, a space where meaning is no longer given, it must be made, a space where certainty is replaced with awareness, where instead of knowing, you begin to notice, instead of answering, you begin to ask. The collapse of the absolute is not a failure, it is a threshold a door you step through when you are brave enough to admit that you no longer need final answers, that you are strong enough to live with uncertainty, that you do not have to hold everything together. You only have to be present with the pieces. Now picture a man who once believed in absolutes. He believed in right and wrong, in reward and punishment, in the idea that if he lived a good life, good things would happen. But then something broke. He lost someone. He was betrayed. He did everything right, but the world did not reward him. And so he began to ask, what if there is no formula? What if the universe is not a system of moral balance, but something more complex, more wild, more alive? He feels the loss of that certainty like grief. But then, in the space that opens up, he begins to feel something else, a quiet freedom. The freedom to stop pretending he knows. The freedom to stop judging others by rules he no longer trusts. The freedom to explore, to grow, to change without needing to prove anything. When the absolute collapses, what remains is awareness. Not the kind of awareness that tries to control, but the kind that watches, that listens, that feels. You begin to understand that truth is not a destination, it is a process. That meaning is not a structure. It is an experience. This can feel scary, because we like the feeling of being right, of having something solid to stand on. But real growth does not come from being right. It comes from being open, and the collapse of the absolute is what makes that openness possible. You stop asking, what should I believe, and start asking, what am I noticing? You stop asking who is right, and start asking, what can I learn? You begin to understand that the world is not made of answers. It is made of questions, and those questions are alive. Even science, which we often see as the highest form of certainty, is not absolute. It is a method of testing and revising, of always reaching and never arriving. It changes with new evidence. It grows with new minds. It is a reminder that truth is a moving thing. Even religion, which offers great comfort in absolutes, is full of paradoxes, full of interpretations, full of stories that shift across cultures and time. Even within the same tradition, people disagree, and yet somehow they still find meaning. Not because they all agree, but because they all seek. So maybe the purpose of the absolute was never to give you a final answer. Maybe its purpose was to guide you until you were strong enough to question it, to hold it gently, to say thank you, and then let it go. And what replaces it is not nothing. It is not chaos. It is presence. You begin to live more fully in the moment. Because you are no longer rushing towards some perfect future. You begin to listen more deeply to others. Because you are no longer judging their words against a single truth. You begin to feel more compassion. Because you understand that everyone is navigating their own collapse in their own way. The collapse of the absolute does not destroy meaning. It reveals where meaning truly comes from connection, from experience, from the quiet courage to live without needing to be certain. You can still have values, still have beliefs, still have purpose, but now they are not walls, they are windows. They let light in, they let your understanding change as you grow, and in that change, you find something stronger than certainty. You find depth, humility, humanity, because to be human is not to know everything. It is to wonder, to search, to fall and rise and fall again, to lose what felt solid and find what is real in the spaces in between. The collapse of the absolute is not the end. It is the beginning of real seeing, real listening, real being. And that is not a loss. That is a gift. The terror of the timeless. Imagine time suddenly stops, not just the ticking of the clock or the motion of the planets, but something deeper. The sense of before and after disappears. The feeling of progress vanishes. You are not in a moment. You are not waiting for the next. You are suspended. There is no past to look back on, no future to imagine, just the endless presence of now. At first it feels peaceful, a quiet you have never known. But slowly, the silence grows louder. The stillness becomes heavy. You begin to realize that you are no longer moving. You are no longer becoming. You are trapped in something that does not end and does not begin. This is the terror of the timeless. We live our lives wrapped in the fabric of time. It is the structure that gives us meaning. We look to the past to explain who we are. We look to the future to guide where we are going. Even our pain depends on time. The promise that what hurts now may hurt less later. The idea that wounds heal, that change is coming, that the moment will pass. But what if it does not? The idea of timelessness is often treated as something spiritual, a goal, a release from suffering. In meditation, we are told to be present, to let go of time, to rest in the now. But few speak of the darker side, the side where timelessness is not peace, but paralysis, where the escape from time feels less like freedom and more like erasure, because without time you cannot grow, you cannot anticipate, you cannot reflect, you cannot hope. Hope itself is built on time. It lives in the idea that something better lies ahead, that things can be different, that we are not stuck. But in the timeless, there is no ahead. There is only the eternal repetition of stillness. And that stillness, when seen clearly, becomes a kind of horror. It is a horror that comes not from chaos, but from its absence. A world where nothing dies but nothing is born either. Where there is no urgency, no decay, no rhythm. Where memory does not matter because nothing changes. Where goals dissolve because there is no motion to carry you toward them. The philosopher Heidegger wrote about the importance of time in shaping our experience of being. He believed that our sense of self is tied to the flow of time. We are who we are because we project ourselves into the future, carry the past, and make decisions in the present. Without that flow, we lose the thread of identity. We do not just stop moving through time. We begin to forget what movement even felt like. Some people glimpse this terror during deep meditation, during intense existential crises, or in moments of psychological collapse. When the usual markers of time seem to vanish, minutes feel like hours feel like seconds, the day loses its shape, the world continues, but you are not in sync with it anymore. You feel detached, disconnected, suspended in something you cannot explain. Others describe it in dreams, the kind where you float endlessly, where there is no change, no ending, just an infinite loop that never moves forward, and the more you try to escape it, the more you realize there is nowhere to go, because the idea of going somewhere implies time, and here, time has vanished. This timeless state is not always terrifying at first. It can feel peaceful. It can feel like stepping out of the noise. But the longer you stay, the more you sense that something essential is missing. The heartbeat of becoming, the pulse of growth, the invisible thread that ties your moments together and gives your life direction. In some philosophical views, time is seen as an illusion, a mental construct, a way our brains organize experience. And if this is true, then timelessness is not something that happens after life. It is the reality underneath, the ground we stand on before we learn to measure it. But if that is the case, then what is this life we are living? A dream, a flicker inside a stillness that never ends. This thought can lead to despair. Because if everything we value depends on time, and time is not real, then are our values illusions too? Is love just a chemical feeling stretched across imagined moments? Is purpose just a line we draw on a map that never existed? But perhaps there is another way to see it. Perhaps the terror of the timeless is not meant to break us. Maybe it is meant to wake us up, to remind us that the present is not just a step between 2 points. It is everything. That the moments we try to escape by looking forward or backward are the very moments where life happens. That even if time is not real in the deepest sense, our experience of it is, and that experience is sacred. Maybe the timeless is not a place to run from, but a place to visit, to touch, to feel, to rest in, not forever, but enough to remember that becoming is not the only way of being, that stillness has a voice too, and that silence, when heard fully, is not emptiness, it is depth. Still, we must be careful, because timelessness can become a trap if we forget how to return, if we forget how to care, how to move, how to act. If we begin to believe that nothing matters because nothing lasts, we lose something essential. We lose the thread that ties us to each other, because love needs time. Kindness needs time. Growth, healing, forgiveness, change, all of them need time. And even if time is an illusion, it is the illusion we live in, the stage where our stories unfold, the frame that gives our choices shape. So when the terror of the timeless visits you, do not run. Sit with it. Feel its weight. Let it show you the stillness beneath your busy life. But do not stay there forever. Return to the world. Return to the clock, to the calendar, to the messy, beautiful rhythm of time. Because in that rhythm, you are not just floating. You are dancing, the incoherence of the soul. Imagine sitting by a quiet lake. The water is still, and your reflection looks peaceful. But as you stare deeper, you notice something strange. The image does not hold. It wavers. It shifts. Sometimes it looks like you. Sometimes it feels like someone else. You try to understand what you are seeing. You try to hold it still. But the more you look, the more it slips away. That is what it feels like to search for the soul, a calm surface with something uncertain underneath. We are told we have a soul, that there is something inside us that is true, unchanging, pure, a core that defines who we are. But when you begin to look closely, the soul does not behave like something fixed. It does not stay still. It does not give simple answers. It moves. It hides. It contradicts itself. It is full of noise and silence, love and fear, light and shadow. We often speak of the soul as if it is a single thing, but what if it is not one voice, but many? What if it is not a center, but a collection? What if the soul is not coherent, but fragmented, a shifting blend of stories, instincts, dreams, and doubts? What if the idea of a single true self is something we created because we could not bear the chaos within? Think of a moment when you felt deeply peaceful, maybe watching a sunset, or listening to music, or holding someone you love. In that moment, you might have felt connected to your soul, like something true inside you had risen to the surface. But then, only hours later, you felt anger, or anxiety, or a desire that seemed to pull you in a different direction. Did your soul change, or did a different part of you take over? The incoherence of the soul shows itself in the way we live. We want comfort, but we also chase challenge. We want connection, but we also fear being known. We say we believe in kindness, but we hurt people we love. We speak of truth, but we lie to ourselves. These are not failures. They are signs that we are not made of one thing. We are not singular. We are layered. We are inconsistent. And yet, we still try to find the real me. We search for authenticity, for identity, for a version of ourselves that will finally feel like the answer. But every time we think we have found it, something shifts. A new situation brings out a different side. A crisis reshapes what matters. A single moment of grief or beauty can make us feel like a stranger to ourselves. This is not weakness. It is the nature of being alive. The soul is not a statue. It is a sea. It changes with the tides. It carries both memory and possibility. It is not something you find and hold. It is something you live through. And that living is not always neat. Now picture this woman. She has spent years trying to be true to herself. She reads. She meditates. She listens to her feelings. She believes in growth. But some days, she feels like she is falling apart. Like the person she was yesterday has vanished. Like the person she wants to be is unreachable. She wonders, If I have a soul, why do I feel so divided? This question haunts many people because we want coherence. We want our inner world to make sense. But sometimes the most honest answer is, it does not, and maybe it does not need to. The soul may be a mirror that reflects differently each time we look, or a song that changes with the instruments playing it, or a sky with clouds always shifting. We keep looking for a fixed shape, but maybe the soul is the movement itself. This does not mean we are empty. It means we are vast. And within that vastness, there is room for contradiction, for softness and rage, for doubt and devotion, for the moments we feel lost and the moments we feel found. Even the idea of a good soul is blurry. What does it mean to be good? Is it kindness? Honesty? Sacrifice? And what if those values clash? What if being kind means being dishonest? What if being honest causes pain? The soul does not always give clear instructions. Sometimes it gives silence. And in that silence we have to choose. And sometimes we do not know why we chose what we did. That not knowing can feel heavy, but it can also be freeing, because it means we are not bound by one version of ourselves. We can change. We can grow. We can fall and rise and fall again without betraying some fixed idea of who we are meant to be. Some people find comfort in believing the soul is eternal, that it carries through lifetimes, that it holds a purpose. Others believe the soul is an illusion, a word for something the brain cannot explain. But whether or not the soul exists as a thing, we all feel something within us that moves, that aches, that longs for meaning, that watches the world and asks, "Who am I really?" That watcher is not always wise. Sometimes it is scared. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is overwhelmed, but it is there. And maybe the soul is not a solid self. Maybe it is that soft watcher, the one who notices, the one who feels the confusion and keeps going. So what do we do with the incoherence of the soul? We stop chasing the final version of ourselves. We stop waiting for everything to make sense, and we start listening to what is here. We let the soul be a question, not an answer, a presence, not a proof. We live with the contradictions. We honor the complexity. We let ourselves be different tomorrow than we are today. We forgive the parts that do not align. We hold space for the mess and the mystery. And slowly, something shifts. Not toward clarity, but toward peace. The peace of knowing we do not have to be one thing, that our depth is not a flaw, that our shifting nature is not a problem to fix, but a truth to respect. The incoherence of the soul is not something to solve. It is something to live, gently, honestly, fully, with the understanding that what you are is not a finished sentence. It is an unfolding story, a movement of light and shadow. And it is enough, even when it makes no sense, even when it never will. Ethics in a godless cosmos. Picture this man standing in the middle of a wide desert under a black sky filled with stars. No sounds, no signs, no voice to guide him. He looks up, hoping to feel watched, hoping to feel known. But the sky gives nothing, no message, no command, just distance, just silence. And slowly the question rises inside him like heat. If there is no God watching, no eternal lawgiver, then why should I do good? Why should I care? What makes anything right or wrong when the universe itself does not respond? This is the weight of living in a godless cosmos, a place where the stars do not reward kindness, where the earth does not punish cruelty, where justice does not fall from the sky, and where meaning, if it exists at all, must be made by hands that will one day turn to dust. For many centuries, morality was built on the idea of a higher power, a divine presence that set the rules and gave purpose to life. If you followed those rules, you were righteous. If you broke them, you were sinful. This structure gave people comfort. It made good and evil feel absolute. It gave suffering a purpose and death a doorway. But as the world grew more complex, that certainty began to crack. Science explained more and more of what religion used to claim. Philosophers began to ask, what remains if we take God out of the picture? What happens to right and wrong when they are no longer tied to heaven? Can we still speak of morality if there is no ultimate judge? Some people say no. They believe that without a divine anchor, everything becomes relative. That without God, ethics is just opinion. That nothing really matters. But others argue the opposite, that it is exactly because there is no God watching that our choices become even more meaningful. Because if no one else is deciding what is right, then it falls to us. And that responsibility is terrifying and sacred at the same time. In a godless cosmos, there are no guarantees. You can do the right thing and suffer. You can hurt others and never be punished. The moral arc of the universe does not always bend toward justice. Sometimes it snaps in the wrong direction. And yet, we still have the power to choose, to care, to act, not because we are forced to, but because we decide to. That decision is where ethics begins, not in obedience, but in awareness, in the ability to feel the pain of others, in the ability to imagine a better world, in the quiet understanding that we are all alone together on this strange planet spinning through indifferent space. And if we want life to mean something, we have to create that meaning ourselves. This is not easy. It means facing the fact that morality is not written in the stars, that it is something fragile, something human, something we must protect, because if we do not, no one else will. There is no cosmic backup, no eternal safety net, just us, our choices, our actions, our consequences. But perhaps this makes morality more powerful, not less. If you help someone only because you fear punishment, is that truly good? If you are kind only to be rewarded, is that truly kind? When you act without expecting anything in return, when you choose compassion simply because it feels right, that is when your ethics become real. Not borrowed, not imposed, but yours. Some thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus embraced this view. They believe that the absence of God does not remove value, it reveals it. It shows that every moment, every action, every relationship is what we make of it, that we must become the authors of our own moral world. And in that freedom there is both dread and beauty. Because freedom means uncertainty. It means we will disagree, that we will struggle to define justice, fairness, and harm. But it also means growth, dialogue, evolution. It means we are not locked into ancient codes, but can respond to the needs of the present with open minds and open hearts. In a godless cosmos, love still exists. So does kindness, forgiveness, courage. These are not divine gifts. They are human strengths. They rise from our vulnerability, from the knowledge that we are fragile, fleeting, and deeply connected. That your joy matters to me, even if no one else is watching. That your suffering is not meaningless, even if the stars remain silent. We can build ethics not on the fear of divine punishment, but on empathy. On the shared understanding that we all hurt, we all hope, we all seek peace in different ways. And in recognizing that, we find common ground. This does not mean morality is easy. It means we must be thoughtful, we must examine our motives, we must listen, we must be willing to be wrong, and we must be willing to stand up, even when it is hard, because no higher being is going to do it for us. In a godless cosmos, we are not lost. We are awake. We are not without direction. We are choosing the path with every step. And that path, uncertain as it may be, is ours to walk with honesty, with care, and with courage. So when you feel the silence of the stars pressing down, when you feel small beneath the vastness of space, remember this: the universe may not care what you do, but you can. And that care, that choice, is what turns emptiness into meaning. The agony of becoming. Imagine standing in the middle of two mirrors facing each other. You look into one, and you see yourself reflected again and again, stretching far into the distance. Every reflection is you, but not quite. Some are younger, some are older, some look stronger, some look tired. You are stuck between what you were and what you were trying to become, and the space between those reflections begins to ache. This is the agony of becoming, the slow pull between who you are and who you think you should be. We talk about growth like it is a beautiful thing, and sometimes it is. But we rarely talk about the pain that comes with it, because to grow is to shed, to leave behind, to unlearn. It is to be broken open. Becoming is not a soft path. It is a road that tests every part of you. It asks you to question your comfort, to confront your weakness, to face the parts of yourself you have avoided. You may want to change. You may dream of a better version of yourself, but wanting is not enough. The process of becoming demands patience, and it does not always feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like losing yourself, like forgetting how to be. You wake up one day, and you no longer fit into the life you once loved. But you also do not belong to the new life yet. You are stuck in the in-between. And that space is where the agony lives. Picture this woman. She is learning to let go of old patterns. She no longer wants to live in fear. She wants to speak her truth. But every time she tries, her voice shakes. Her hands tremble. She remembers being silenced. She remembers being punished for honesty. And now, even though she is free, the old pain still controls her. She is becoming, but it does not feel like power. It feels like pain. Because the person she is becoming cannot grow unless the old version of her falls apart first. And falling apart does not feel noble. It feels like failure, like confusion, like sadness. You may doubt everything. You may want to return to what is familiar, even if it hurts you, just because at least you understand it. Growth does not always feel like light. Sometimes it feels like darkness, like wandering through a hallway where every door is locked and you cannot remember where you came from. Becoming is not just about choosing new habits or thinking new thoughts. It is about facing the layers you have built to protect yourself, the armor you wore to survive, the masks you created to be accepted, and taking those off feels like standing naked in a storm. You feel exposed. You feel uncertain. You feel raw. And yet, deep inside, there is something that will not stop pushing you forward. A quiet knowing that this pain is not the end, that this struggle is not for nothing, that something real is forming in the fire. You do not become by escaping who you were. You become by walking through it, by looking it in the eye, by saying yes to the discomfort. But it hurts. It hurts because becoming requires loss. Loss of identity, loss of certainty, loss of people who only loved the version of you that stayed small. You may feel alone. Not because no one is around you, but because you are no longer the person they knew, and they do not know how to hold your new shape. This loneliness is part of the journey. It is not a mistake. It is the space you need to meet yourself again, to listen to the voice inside you that has been whispering beneath the noise. It is quiet at first, but it grows stronger the more you let go of who you thought you were supposed to be. The agony of becoming is the pain of peeling away the false layers, of digging into the truth, of choosing to be real over being liked, of risking rejection for the chance to be whole. It is the moment when you realize that staying the same is no longer an option, but changing means stepping into the unknown. And the unknown is not gentle. It tests your resolve. It questions your intentions. It makes you face everything you used to hide from. You may feel like giving up. You may ask yourself why it hurts so much to grow. But the pain is not a punishment. It is proof that something is shifting, that you are not numb, that you are alive and in motion. This process has no clear timeline. You may move forward for weeks, then fall back in a day. You may feel powerful one moment and terrified the next. But this is the rhythm of becoming. It is not a straight line, it is a spiral, and every time you return to the same fear, you meet it from a new place, with more courage, with more awareness, with more softness. And slowly, very slowly, the pain begins to change. It becomes something else, not comfort, but clarity, not ease, but depth. You start to see that the agony was never the enemy. It was the doorway, the pressure that revealed who you really are. You begin to understand that becoming is not about perfection. It is not about fixing yourself. It is about accepting the parts you once rejected, holding the pain instead of pushing it away, offering love to the version of you that did not know how to receive it before. And with this shift comes peace, not the loud kind, not the kind that makes everything better, but the kind that lets you sit with your becoming without needing it to be finished, the kind that allows you to be in process, to be messy, to be unsure. You no longer need to rush. You no longer need to pretend. You allow yourself to unfold, to soften, to listen. The agony of becoming is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you are moving, that you are growing, that you are shedding what no longer fits so you can live in your own skin, so you can breathe without apology. And one day, you will look back and see that every ache was part of the forming. Every tear was part of the release. Every lost version of you is not a failure, but a bridge to the next. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are becoming, and that is enough. Even in the pain, even in the silence, even when nothing makes sense, you are not lost. You are becoming. The Specter of Determinism. Picture this man sitting quietly in a train that moves along a track he cannot see. He is holding a book, but he is not reading. His mind is somewhere else. He is wondering why he said what he said last night, why he made that choice 5 years ago, why he always seems to repeat the same patterns. He thinks about the people he hurt, the opportunities he missed, the dreams he walked away from. And in the stillness of that moment, a single question begins to form. Was I ever really choosing anything, or was everything always going to happen exactly this way? This is the specter of determinism. The quiet, creeping idea that everything we do is the result of causes we did not choose, that every word, every action, every thought is the next step in a chain that began long before we were born. That free will, the thing we most rely on to feel human, might be nothing more than an illusion, a comforting story told by a brain that was never really in control. Determinism is the belief that all events, including human behavior, are caused by prior conditions, that nothing happens by chance, that everything is part of a system, from the motion of the planets to the beating of your heart to the decisions you make when no one is watching. And if this is true, then freedom becomes a shadow, a feeling, but not a fact. It starts small. You remember something you did and wonder what led you there. Maybe it was the way you were raised, the pain you carried, the fear you never talked about. Maybe it was your biology, your habits, your environment. And slowly, the line between choice and compulsion begins to blur. You start to see that what you thought were decisions were actually reactions, that your path might have been written in the way your childhood shaped your mind, or the way your brain interprets emotion. This idea is not just philosophical. It has roots in science. Neuroscience shows that our brains make decisions before we become consciously aware of them. Physics tells us that the universe follows patterns and laws that leave little room for true randomness. Psychology shows how deeply our behavior is shaped by things we do not understand. So where does that leave us? If our choices are not really choices, if our lives are just the unfolding of causes and effects, then what becomes of responsibility, of guilt, of growth? What becomes of redemption, forgiveness, or even love, if all of it is just the result of prior inputs? Some respond to this by saying that determinism removes all meaning, that if we are not free, nothing matters. But others say the opposite, that determinism, once understood deeply, does not take away meaning. It changes it. It replaces blame with understanding. It turns shame into compassion. If someone acts out of pain they did not choose, maybe they do not need punishment, maybe they need healing. The specter of determinism becomes most haunting when we apply it to ourselves. When we ask whether we could have done anything differently, whether the person we are today is truly the result of effort or simply the result of conditions. You think about your regrets, the chances you missed, the people you lost, and you wonder if you ever had the power to make it different. And yet, even as you wonder, life continues. You still feel, you still try, you still care, which leads to the paradox at the center of this idea. Even if everything is determined, you still live as if it is not. You still make plans, you still wrestle with choices, you still hope for change. And that tension does not go away. Some philosophers have tried to resolve this with a concept called compatibilism, the belief that determinism and free will can both be true in a certain way, that you are free as long as you are acting according to your desires and not under external compulsion. Even if those desires were caused by past events, they are still yours. But this answer does not always feel satisfying, because it still means that the core of who you are was shaped by forces outside your control. So maybe the point is not to escape determinism. Maybe the point is to understand what it means to live within it, to recognize that you are not a blank slate, that you are the product of stories, conditions, genetics, and chance. But that awareness itself is part of the system. That when you become aware of your programming, you begin to shift it. Maybe you cannot step outside the train, but maybe you can move through the compartments with more clarity. Maybe you can see others more gently, knowing they too are passengers in a machine they did not design. Maybe you can forgive more quickly, listen more deeply, judge more slowly. The specter of determinism does not have to haunt you. It can teach you. It can remind you that control is not the same as responsibility. That growth is not about being perfectly free, but about becoming more aware. That your life, even if shaped by causes, is still yours to witness, yours to experience, yours to bring meaning to. You may not have chosen your path, but you are still the one walking it, and in every step, there is the possibility of seeing more clearly, of understanding more fully, of acting with deeper intention, even if intention itself is part of the system. So the next time you feel trapped by your own past, or by the idea that everything is already written, remember this. Awareness changes how the script is read, and sometimes that is enough to make the story worth living. And that's Ithope, you're in peace. Just consider subscribing, because sleep matters. Just then, stress scatters and nothing else matters, right? Peace out.